Member Lopez,
Present.
Vice President Otto, President Craighead,
Here.
Member Benitez, Member Miller. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's see. On the agenda, we have public testimony. No one for public testimony. So that will lead us to our first item of business. So, good morning, Mr. Itzen. I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, board members and district leaders and everyone watching at home. For those watching, I'm Chris, administrator in the communications department. I have my dear colleague, Lee Underwood, who is a teacher from Milliken High School, who's been part of this work. You may remember we came and presented a while back, earlier in the year. For us, it feels like it was about 5 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So we are so excited today to bring before you information on the proposed draft of our policy, which is reclaiming attention, limiting distractions, supporting wellness, policy on student phone use, cyberbullying, and social media safety. And I want to start by just saying that it's come up a lot. We want to always be clear that we are not anti-technology. No one in this team is talking about that there's a problem with technology. It's about purposeful and meaningful use of technology. And as we noted in the first time we came, the research is showing, and it's really why this law was passed by the governor, that we need to pull the reins and we need to put some restrictions and limitations on specific technology to support our kids' well-being and safety and to support learning. And so one thing that is so unique where I think we have an opportunity to lead in Long Beach is that this policy goes further than probably what any other district is doing. So it's very easy to say, okay, there's going to be a restriction on cell phones, but we really wanted to be intentional and bring in the pieces around inappropriate use of social media, cyberbullying, and the inappropriate use of platform-based applications. Because today's smartphone, it's all one and the same. It's not separate anymore. It's not like you had a cell phone. After 2015, the App Store, you see such a difference and change in the way these platforms are used, and they're interconnected. And so the phone is a distraction, but it's also an ability for a student to make some very serious mistakes and to hurt others with that. And it's very easy. Those things are interconnected. So our policy goes a little bit further. And so if you've had a chance to even look through the draft, you see a very distinct split in the policy where the first part talks about the distraction piece, the second part talks about platform-based applications and all the other appropriate use pieces and stuff. But it's really all part of a larger problem, so it's all interconnected. So I'm going to walk you through kind of where we've been this year, what's been going on with our work group that consists of about 47 individuals across the district, from teachers to students to site leaders to central office staff, parents, guardians, caregivers. Some of our nonprofits have supported this work, and so there's been some people that have been heavily involved in the work group to people who've just been collaborators and advisors. There's people sitting around this table that engage and helped us in this process as well, and really with the goal of developing the policy that we proposed when we came before. And so the biggest thing to start with is we took different pieces. One was looking at extensive internal and external research. So one, what is the research outside saying? What are other districts doing? What's already working within the system? But then also within our system, how do we take an asset-based approach and look at what's already happening? Because the thing is, we already have phone restriction processes happening at many of our schools. I'll get into the list in a minute, but some of our middle schools have been innovating in the last year and really kind of took the charge and went on their own to engage families and put their own restrictions in place, and we've been working with them. Some of our high school teachers have been doing some really innovative stuff as well in their classrooms, and so we wanted to start with what's already working. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's just how do we create something that allows for differentiation but is standardized, unified, and cohesive across the district. And then also engaging our community, talking to parents, talking to kids, talking to our teachers who are on the front lines, talking to our office staff, our administrators that are involved in every daily life on a campus and getting their perspective. A lot of cross-departmental collaboration, not just our school sites, but looking at our restorative justice team, our Center of Black Student Excellence, looking at school safety, different groups that are going to be able to provide input. Our technology branch that was so helpful and engaged in this work with us because they have such rich perspectives, and we wanted to bring all of that together. And then really looking at how do we address the mental health crisis and how do we develop an education and training plan. And I've said this 100 times, and I know I've said it here, and I've said it to some of you individually. As my dear colleague Chris F. used to say, we're an educational institution. We educate our way out of things. And so it's going to take education, and really the policy is just the beginning of this work. I mean, it's getting the ball rolling. It's taking that 10,000 foot view so that we can really get to work on this process. So with that, our internal research, and sorry, I'm forgetting my slides here. So we were very intentional in the way we worked through, and so this was our formalized list. So from a site observation, we went out to Cabrillo, Wilson, Avalon, Powell, Cubberley, and then multiple middle schools, Franklin, Hamilton, Stevens, and Marshall, and really walked classrooms, looked at what was happening in the classroom, looked at classrooms that had policies in place, those that didn't, to see was learning being hindered by phones being out, how was it being addressed, is there verbiage on the wall, is there expectations of the classroom, what's working, what's not. But then also what was even more powerful was interviewing staff and getting their perspective on even the logistics of, like, when they had a restriction policy, what's the challenge of, you know, are you confiscating phones? Are you getting pushback from parents? You know, what are you dealing with? And getting these rich perspectives. You can see even the list, like, yes, there are lots of other schools in the district, but in our sample set, Cabrillo and Wilson are on 2 different sides of town. Very different situations at some points. Wilson has a lot of really innovative teachers under Ms. Caverly that are doing some great work on this, and so we wanted to kind of see what was already working over the last 2 years, versus Cabrillo had a very unique situation where we studied one of their pathways that all the teachers have unified and developed a process together for restricting phones, while another one didn't. They had individual policies, and we wanted to see what's the difference, what was working across the board. And then our K-8s are so unique. I mean, you have 4-year-olds and 13-year-olds on the same campus, so, like, what does that look like? And so really getting their perspective. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, Franklin, Hamilton, Stevens, and Marshall all kind of unified, and they put into place their own policy this year. And so we wanted to study what was working. How did they engage their parents? What was the process? What does it look like second semester when, you know, the kids start maybe getting squirrely, getting towards the end of the year? How do they address that? So looking at the whole year with that. And then also working with school support services and our special education department, which was so valuable, and reaching out to our parents and community advisory committee and getting the perspectives for our students with disabilities and what does that look like. Also students, multilingual learners. We worked with Long Beach Forward, one of our nonprofits that was very, very supportive and helpful. And then 2 other groups that I think are unique to the process are, one was and they're listed, I'm going to go backwards, but our business advisory group. So working with the Pathway and Business Engagement Office, we went out and did focus groups with industry partners from public sector and the private sector, and looked at the job market and who are the new recruits coming in, or what are kids like, and do you see an impact of phone use on these 19, 20, 21-year-olds coming in, and getting their perspective on what we need to be doing in the classroom to support kids being future ready, and where the impact of the phone might be a problem. And that was really eye-opening. And then the last one, also working with our curriculum leads in OCAPD. One question we often ask ourselves in our work group is, okay, if we do this, now we have their attention, what now? What do we do? We're taking away this thing that sucks our attention. How are we going to deeply engage our students and make sure lessons are dynamic, and that kids are engaged and connected, and they're building relationships? And OCAPD is developing curriculum and content and supporting teachers in the classroom. So as they're developing, they need to be aware of this, that this is going to be a major issue. And so it was very valuable to talk to them and get their perspectives, and to start, again, the beginning of a relationship of moving in this work. So that was our internal research. And from there, we did a lot of community engagement, so meeting with every single parent group, from CAC to Sankofa to District English Learners to our District Community Advisory, our Educational Opportunities for Native Americans, some various PTAs that reached out, a lot of coalition building and starting to talk to parents about this process. And I will tell you, I have not met a single resistant parent yet. I met parents with questions about how this is going to be enforced and what the process is, but it's very clear across the entire system that people understand that we need to do something about this, not just because it's a law, but because it's good for our kids. So just having those rich conversations and getting those parents to help us deploy our surveys and talk to other parents. Met with the middle and high school leadership councils, worked very closely with TALB and the LBUSD safety and civility committees, and getting teacher perspectives, and even our classified staff that may be impacted, and went back many times and had many conversations together. Meeting with our ET and K-8 principal meeting, also shared all the content with our secondaries. With students, we met with the middle school RSVP group to get their perspective. We did an initial focus group with Sato, a very unique school of all of our high schools that's going to have a different perspective. Communications department interns, we are so blessed to have a massive amount of interns. We're ongoing doing focus groups with them. We just met with 15 of them on Monday, did another focus group. It's probably our 7th one with that group, so continuing to engage those kids. And then at Powell, we did a student focus group with some of our middle schoolers to get their perspective. And then a lot of safety presentations, meeting with parents, and they're all listed there. We piloted at Washington Middle School, thanks to Dr. Williams, for a teacher presentation. We hadn't done anything with teachers yet, and the idea was, well, what are we going to engage teachers and what do they need? So we kind of tested some resources for them, and then meeting with students at all the schools listed. And then we also surveyed, starting with their principals to get their perspective as leaders on their campus, then our teachers, and then our parents, guardians, and caregivers, and asking the community, what their perspective was on this process. And then from an external standpoint, we are part of the California School PR Network and also NSPR, the National School PR Network. So we have a network that we share resources with, so reaching out to other schools across the state and country and saying, what are you doing, what's working? Los Al is very interested in partnering with us right now and seeing this work go on because they haven't really fully engaged yet, and so we're already having some conversations as our neighbor, looking at what the U.S. Department of Education is saying. And then one thing I want to highlight, we did a policy crosswalk, and this is when I talk about cross collaboration of different departments in this district was so powerful. Shout out to Daro and Dr. Madrigal in our research office. They helped us pull and research other school districts that had similar demographics and similar systems that we have in place to look at their policies, early adapters, one school district that already put a policy in place and then had to modify it again. So we wanted to see districts that were similar, and so we walked through, and it's districts I would have never even known about, but Ventura, Broward County, Prince William, and Fullerton, and really got to utilize best practices that they're already using, and then looking at some of their pitfalls and being careful of that. Also, we have exhaustively researched all of California Education Code, the Penal Code, federal law, looked at every little aspect of that, every one of the board policies that already is part of Long Beach Unified, to really see what unifies this policy and what are things that connect with that. So before I move on, because you all know I talk fast and I know you have a busy day today, before I get into the components or the meat of it, is there anything around the engagement or research that anyone wants to ask?
Apologies, Mr. Edson. I got here a couple minutes late, so sorry if you covered this at the beginning. Did we do any surveys with teachers on their perspectives as to how phones were being either disruptive and or to what extent? Sort of district specific surveys?
Yes, absolutely. So we ran a full survey with our teaching staff, and we also invited teacher or certificate staff outside the classroom, and then even some classified staff that may be impacted by this process. And we asked them questions like, does your school have a uniform policy? Do you feel that it's enforced? It was an anonymous survey as well. We wanted to get real feedback, so we didn't collect email addresses, and we said we want to know what you're thinking. Is this a disruption in your class? Do you have your own individual process? So it was very exhaustive.
What you got, the three takeaways from the business advisory focus groups that added to what you were doing.
That's a great question. One, that the use of this, like the research that we've been looking at, things that Jonathan Hyde has been talking about, the people who've been ringing the alarm bell about this issue, that was validated in what industry was saying, that they're seeing problematic issues with young people coming into the workforce and being distracted and not being able to be committed, and struggling with setting goals, struggling with consistency, and they all felt overwhelmingly without us asking, because in a focus group we're so careful to not bias the conversation, and so while we had other questions we were asking, we just kind of let it come to this conversation, and they were very adamant that they see that very clearly.
That's one.
I would say one takeaway for me, and it's something that I think we already do and lead in our district. It's why that Pathway Business Engagement office is doing such a great job in OCAPD, is that they are seeking the input of industry, of our public and private sectors, of what we need to be teaching kids to prepare them for college and career. It's very obvious. This was a collaborative project with OCAPD where they needed this information for something else they were doing for the focus group. We needed it for the cell phone, and so we just collaborated together, and it all worked together. But that apparatus already exists in Long Beach to engage our business partners, which I think is invaluable as we think about moving forward. We think about implementing, the elements of Vision 2035 and our graduate portrait and our strategic plan. Industry has to be involved in that. You kind of got me on the third one. Just great feedback, listening to their perspective.
And you talk about the Ed Code and the Penal Code and all that. Is there a document that's been generated, or I know they're listed here, but the code sections and where it is there somebody that's worked on that, I'm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the policy draft, we do list every single code that is applicable to each section. In the guidance document, which I'll talk about at the end, there's going to be a summary of every single one of those codes listed as a fast reference, even for school sites, for a principal or teacher to be, look down and go, okay, what's Jordan's law, or what's the federal impersonation law on social media, and have at least a blurb and where to go to find more information on it.
Great, thanks.
So I will say, I think that we've done an exhaustive conversation with those that are from the internal aspects of phone usage and will be impacted by this potential policy. One of the questions that I have, and excuse me if it maybe sounds a little outside of the box, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Have we looked at approaching or engaging those from the marketing aspect? Because that's the way that I think of social media, as a marketing tool, right? So have we talked about engaging like folks from the marketing sector and the phone companies themselves, the social media companies themselves, and engaging them in these conversations, knowing that districts of our size are doing things that can potentially impact their business, not necessarily from a negative sense, but how do we work together cross collaboratively? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. Very, very, very challenging question. I would say from the marketing standpoint, no, we haven't really engaged in that sense, because this is a very different situation in dealing with just the way kids are using during the school day. I think from the social media company side, I can stand on, and I'm saying this live on a social media platform right now, it's very troubling. They don't care. And it's just the way it is. I mean, even to the point where I got to go around and broadcast that we now have a partnership with Instagram. We're a school partner, and it's supposed to be this great way for us to be able to easily report malicious accounts. It's worse with that account than it was before. They don't care. Now, we are looking to reach out to some local officials, different folks within the state government that are very supportive of this work and doing their own work and finding more ways to cross-collaborate. A big part of a secondary big piece of our approach in this long-term goal is how are we lobbying at the state? How are we pushing further and stuff? So we want to move that way. It's just no one is pioneering it, and there's a lot of different people doing their own thing right now. So we're also looking at how can we come together as a billion-dollar organization, a large leading school district in the state, and say, hey, can we help pioneer this work with other folks?
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the policy. So this is the basics. So it's broken down into 3 sections: restricting the use of personal or wearable electronics in our schools, which I'll define what that is in a moment. Our student expectations and guidelines for cyberbullying and inappropriate use of social media. And then there's some language on school level implementation and how to support schools. Now you'll notice, and I have it really big in orange, is the effective date to go district wide for this policy, if passed, is January 26th, which is second semester. And now
2026.
2026. I'm sorry. Oh, there's a typo in there. I might have one. 2026. Thank you. And the idea is, this was a long conversation with our work group, with our team over the year, with many of our schools. I have colleagues and friends in schools that have said, we want to go now. We want to do this immediately. My fear always is to be so careful to rush into something this big. This is much larger issue than people realize all the time. It's really easy to say, like, oh, smartphones are addictive or they have issues. But if you really dig into the research of this issue, it's so much more complicated than we can imagine. And the phones aren't going away, right? Like, I mean, I would be a hypocrite to stand up before you as your head of marketing who runs 14 social media companies to say it's all evil, right? We use it, it's positive. But for children, there needs to be this break and bury, and we're trying to find a really, really succinct and strategic way to do that, and we want to do it right. And a big part of that is spending the next semester on an education campaign, which I'll talk a little bit more at the end, but really driving it home why this matters. As I've talked to parents and just seen their eyes open and seeing what this issue is, where maybe they don't really even understand what their kid's doing on a phone, to even some of our teachers, to just on Monday, I had a great experience with a focus group of some of our students where I'm explaining all this, and this is a focus group where I went in to say, we're going to do this, so I'm just trying to get your feedback. It's probably not going to change, because I never want to lie to students and tell them I'm getting their feedback if I'm not going to respond to it. And so I shared everything with them, talked about their relationship with their phones, and then a lot about the negative of it. And then as I walked through what the policy possibly could be, a lot of the feedback from the kids was now that I'm reading this and I'm understanding the impact on myself, I get it. It makes sense to me. You just need to make sure that you're communicating that to my peers, that this isn't phones are bad, no, and make it just this punitive thing. And so that was a big part of our decision it's confirming our decision as we walk through taking our time, is that we want to do this right. And I've said this in meetings multiple times. I want to drive this down everybody's throats so bad by the time we get to January, everybody's like, fine, we get it. This totally makes sense, because the science is there. It's obvious. And so we just need to make people informed. That's our job as an educational institution. Now, that doesn't mean we have middle schools that are in implementation. Most of our elementary schools follow this process anyways. We have high schools that want to be early adapters. We were very cautious as a worker when we wrote the policy not to contradict what they're already doing. So what is already happening at schools that comes to restriction works perfectly into the policy. We're going to continue to study those schools. Our middle schools that have been implementing since last year, now we're on year 2. What does that look like? Some of our high schools that have been doing this 2 or 3 years. I know Jordan possibly and Cabrillo High School, don't quote me, but they've reached out to me. They're looking at piloting right now as comprehensive high schools. We haven't seen that yet, so they're going to be our schools that we study as well as we do that. And so even though full implementation is going to take time, we're already seeing the momentum and the ball rolling in that. So here's the meat of it. So the basics is what we're calling personal and or wearable electronic devices are these 6 things. So cell phones or smartphones, smart watches. And when I say smart watches, I'm talking about something that communicates like an Apple Watch, not a Fitbit that tracks your steps. That's the same thing as having a calculator on your watch. That's not a distractive device, and the same thing. Earbuds and headphones, which we've got a ton of feedback. I have and major concerns. I know the kids aren't going to be happy with that, but our staff has brought that up over and over again. Digital cameras, because of a lot of privacy issues. And one that's unique that I have not seen on any other policy are the smart glasses. And if you followed our dear friend Mr. Zuckerberg over at Meta and Facebook, he is hell-bent on making smart glasses that we're all going to be wearing in the next 5 years, and phones are going to go away. And so instead of kids just having this addiction distracted to go to their phone, it's going to be in their face all of the time. And the privacy issue with that is terrifying to me, that they're going to have a camera on the side of their glasses. So we want to get ahead of that process right now, because you can go to optometrists right now and they're already selling them in stores. And so we need to get ahead of this quickly. So here's the breakdown. Very simple. Like I said, some of this is already happening in our schools. It's not a radical push, but in early learning through TK through 5, and then also through 6 through 8, all personal and our wearable communication devices must be powered off, stored in bags for the duration of the school day. Once they arrive on campus, the device remains off and out of sight during all school hours. This also applies to before and after school programs like RAP and Kids Club and those pieces. So just what we're already seeing at our middle school and meant most of our elementary, the phone, you can have your phone. Of course, state law says you're allowed to have your phone. Obviously, parents want that safety net, but at the same time, it's just put away. There's a barrier by having it in the bag, so it's less of a distraction. In my heart of hearts and what the science says, phones should not be at schools. Jonathan Haidt would tell you that, but Jonathan Haidt's not a public educator and doesn't understand the logistics that we deal with day to day. And so we have to come to what's the middle ground to say, this is at least enough to try to have this barrier for our kids. And in the high school, you see the differentiation. Just like in high school, I can drive a car at some point, or I can go see a rated R movie when I'm 17, or I can maybe stay out later. You get a little bit more freedom in high school. So in high school, they just must be powered off and stored in bags during instructional time from the beginning to the end of each class period. So the class period is the attentional sanctuary. That's the place where students are engaging and learning and focusing on that, and they're having these breaks from being on their phone. But as you all know, you're not going to have 4,000 kids at Poly High School not being allowed to use their phone at nutrition and lunch. Like, how would you manage that? Like, that would be and in any of our large schools. So the idea is, at least in the classroom, that's where the privacy issue is there, the cognition and focus issue is there. That's where we're protecting kids. And then last thing, keeping electronic devices stored in their bags at all times when using the restrooms and when participating in field trips and work-based learning experiences, which are part of an instructional process as well, where students are supposed to be learning. As you may know, we've had major problems with kids filming inappropriate things in the bathroom, with things with fights and all kinds of things with ripping sinks off the wall and all kinds of stuff. And having the ability to record it and upload it gives that kid that disinhibition to then want to do it more. It's a motivator, because it's now I can get attention by doing this online. And so also to protect the privacy of other kids, that we wanted to be clear about that. Now, there's an important nuance here, and this was something that we walked through with our families. There are accommodations, and there has to be. These are all based on state law, and they're all based on feedback from our constituents and our community. These are the 4. And I'm not going to go in order, but I'll get through all of them. So one is students shall not be prohibited from possessing or using any of these devices under the following circumstances: in case of emergency or response to a perceived threat of danger. Obviously, we work with school safety to message, hey, when you send a message out in the middle of an emergency, it's usually more of an issue and a problem than it's helpful, right? When 100 kids are sending out a message, you might get misinformation. However, you have to allow for that, and you never know. Something could happen, and that one kid could be the one to get the information out. Obviously, if you're a parent, right, you want your kid to be able to contact you in case of emergency, and it's also part of the law. So that's a no-brainer. The other one is when a licensed physician or surgeon determines that the possession or use is necessary for the student's health and well-being. So we have about 40 or so, and probably more now, students who test their blood sugar, all right? And that can be an issue of life or death, and they use their phone to be able to do that, and their parents are able to see that in real time. That's a given, right? And so that's part of state law. And then, of course, when it's required by the student's IEP, Individualized Education Program, or 504 plan, which is a given. And we are working with a special education department, working with even our CSC advisory group and having conversations about what that looks like. But also, like in our guidance document, making sure counselors are aware, and those folks that are agreeing to an IEP or 504, that they're having real conversations about why a phone needs to be used. It shouldn't be as easy as a parent says, well, my kid has anxiety if they don't have their phone, so they should have their phone. It should be in the IEP. That needs to be a longer, nuanced conversation. Is that a reality, right? It needs to be a real reason to be able to use it, but obviously having that there. And then the last one is when an administrator grants permission to the student to possess or use it, including in a designated area for a reasonable amount of time. So I give this example. I knew a situation where there was a student whose father was incarcerated who was going to call. And she didn't know when dad was going to call. It was going to be within 3 days. And so she asked an administrator, can I just step out of class for 5 seconds in the hallway and talk to my father when he calls, because I don't know when he's going to call. And they made that accommodation for that child. We're human, right? That makes sense. So having that very nuanced word about granting permission, that it's allowable, but then also being so careful, because we don't want that to be an excuse for a teacher to say, and I hope no teacher would do this, that like, oh, I'm cool with phones because I want my kids distracted, because then I don't really have to do much because they're all on their phones and calm as Hindu cows and it's easy. We don't want it to turn into everybody gets to just decide whatever they want to do. So there has to be the restriction, but there's going to be times where obviously a student might need to check their phone or use their phone. And, there's many other examples of it. So those are the accommodations and exceptions from there. Before I go into the last part about the next part of the policy, any questions on the restriction piece?
Just for clarification, so students would be allowed to use their electronic devices, their cell phones, during snack, recess, lunch?
Just high school.
Just in high school?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Itzen, so I understand the out of sight in your backpack. Why did we opt for have the cell phone off versus silence, given the last couple scenarios that you talked about where it could be a parent trying to get a hold of a child, or some arrangement for pickup time after school, or changing, something with the household. If it's off, presumably, let's say elementary school, the whole day and in the backpack, and then it's off in after school program, when would a communication take place between a household and a child versus having it silenced so it's not distracted, it's not disruptive, and then a child, after school or whatever, could look at their phone and see, I have 36 missed calls from a parent trying to get a hold of me, or caregiver. So just clarity around why the off versus the silence or airplane mode or whatever we want to call it.
That's a great question, and I'm going to be bold on it. I think that we talk a lot, and there's many issues in this process of opportunity costs. I used to teach econ and teach seniors, and when I taught the concept of opportunity cost, it's what's the cost of the opportunity. I'm a high school kid, and I got a big paper that's due on Monday, but Sunday night my friends want to go out. I have to decide the cost of that opportunity. If I go out with my friends, I'm either going to have to stay up really late and write my paper, or I'm not going to turn my paper in, or I'm going to have FOMO, miss out, and write my paper, and I got to make that decision. It's the same thing with phones. I often have people give us reasons that they're convenient or make life easier, but that is not necessarily worth the negative side. And so as an example, and I'm speaking very anecdotally, I have an 8-year-old who doesn't have a phone who goes to one of our schools. I trust that I can call that school and get a hold of my child. And we should have that in our district and have that opportunity. We have a major problem that's going all the way down into my daughter's class in the 2nd grade, where parents are contacting their kids in the middle of class constantly. So that's really where a lot of that came from, that the science already says the phone shouldn't even be in the building, or at least outside, and we're not going to get there. in the backpack at least is a barrier, at least off. It's not there, and it's part of it's even reconditioning society. We've made this such a crutch, and it's not the answer. It's causing more problems than good, is what I would say. Okay. So, and then the last part, so this section, well, not the last part, but the part of the policy, and you can read more in the policy draft. I just wanted to kind of give you the highlights, but we made sure to calling out cyberbullying, which is not called out specifically in a policy yet in Long Beach Unified, which is a major, major issue we're dealing with. Inappropriate use of various social media platforms and the misuse of electronic devices. A big piece on filming, recording, and photography, which has been a major problem in our schools at almost all grade levels, especially from 5th grade up, is not filming or taking photographs of anybody without their permission or consent. Not during the phone restriction window, so kids don't have their phones out, and then also during fights, altercation, or criminal acts. That's a huge issue, and it is now a trend for kids to schedule a fight so that they can film it and upload it online. It happens all across the country every single day. It's happening in our district, unfortunately, and it's this notoriety piece. And I had the opportunity this year to sub for some of our principals and been at schools when major fights have been out, and every phone is out when it happens, right? It makes the safety issue worse. And we've tried to think of every single granular layer to this process, right? So I had a principal give me a great pushback and say, yeah, but when kids film it, then we get those videos from the kids, and then it's easier to identify stuff. And I've been involved in those active investigations, and that's great. But that goes back to the opportunity cost. We can't say, because, this will help us figure out a fight, that we should have 100 kids filming a fight. And then when you get into things like Jordan's Law that says if an individual uploads somebody committing a felony and puts it online, it can enhance their sentence. It's the same issue. They're putting violent videos up online all over. As your person who runs social media, I can't get this stuff taken down. Every day I'm getting another video or another piece of content that we cannot even touch. I mean, don't even go on Yelp for your schools, because you'll find something ridiculous and they will not even help us. And so we have to limit that exposure so this stuff is not getting out there that shouldn't be out there. And then impersonation and electronic misrepresentation, there's actually some case law around not impersonating people online, which we've had major issues with people making fake accounts of our teachers and mocking them online, and even some of our students, which can be very, very detrimental, obviously, to their mental health. And then inappropriate use of apps. We were very clear about adding in pieces about other digital apps. And I had a funny, and some of you have shared this with, but the funny thing happened, I'm at one of our schools, and I go to do some work around this project. And in there, the last period of the day, and before I got there were 3 periods in a row where a teacher had their projector crash, one teacher after another, and they couldn't figure out why, and they're having issues with it. A student had downloaded a malicious app that allowed them to crash those projectors, so they crashed one in each one of their classes throughout the day. So we put language in there about these apps that are out there in the App Store that could negatively affect the school day as well, to call that out. So that's the heart of the policy. There's a lot in there about schools having to make sure that they have a safety plan every year and that they're revising it. There's pieces on liability and search and seizure, which are all related to applicable board policies that we already have in place. We followed the exact language. But this is the timeline that we're at. So we've gone from policy and guidance drafting in May with the writing team, more research, more testing of our content as we're preparing to share more resources with staff and students. We finally did the final draft in June, continued these processes. We're presenting to you today, continuing to develop resources and content creation. We have some teacher focus groups coming up. So at the end, I'm going to talk very quickly about our education resources. And in like 2 weeks, I have a group of teachers coming to preview what we've been working on, to say, is this going to be effective in helping you support your kids in the classroom? What else do you need? We're blessed in this district to have a really, really, really strong communications team that's pliable and ready to make more content. And be prepared to do that and make custom content. And so we're ready to do that to be able to support our teachers. And then hoping we get to come back to you in August for a vote and really move on this process. One thing that we have broadcast and spoke with the community is that we need to get this passed so we can really, it's kind of like the trigger to really, really launch our campaign and really move this work forward, continuing to develop resources, launch our education campaign all the way through the first semester. And then in February, it goes live. And so the last piece of that is this page. So this is what we're looking at, and this to me is more fundamental and more powerful than even passing a policy. I think the policy is again the trigger that starts this process, but then it allows us to do the real work. And so having a centralized ongoing communications campaign where Long Beach Unified is leading in this work and then supporting our school sites. We're developing a guidance document right now that has It's a living document. It has a lot going on in it, everything from definitions and terminology to what the specific accommodations, scenarios for behavior intervention, de-escalation language, reporting and synergy, having the new process where you can put in the comments for a student's report card that there's excessive cell phone use to help engage the parents in that process. Not connected to the conduct grade, of course, but allowing to have that content. Social media regulations for staff and best practices, which you already have, but resources to remind our staff about that. An FAQ, different research, external resources. And so building this massive guidance document, that's something that teachers and administrators can look at and go, how do I deal with this? What are some options? Because it's going to be differentiated. It's going to look a little different at schools, but to have a treasure trove. We're building out explainer videos that are focused on speaking to parents, speaking to staff, speaking to kids separately. We already have a social media guide in Long Beach Unified for staff and one for our families. It's won a national award. We are revamping it and redesigning it right now, and we're going to put it out in Spanish as well for the family guide. Posters and infographics that are a unified message across the district, looking at hopefully providing training materials and things on MyPD and working with Canvas with our students and staff. We're developing a brand new podcast series where we're going to talk about all the different aspects of this, hopefully with some really great researchers and authors and community members and different folks across this work. Sample documents like syllabi, parent letters, things that tangibly they can use at school sites. Social media content, which I know is kind of ironic because we're talking about restricting phones. And one thing I'll note on that, as a communications department, we now have a standard rule once this goes into place that we will not post social media during the school day. Unless it's an emergency, because that would be hypocritical for us to say, stay off your phone, but we're posting during the day kind of thing. So really changing even our content strategy to match this work. Phone usage and social media presentations by request. We did like 50 or 60 last year. I'm super grateful to our school safety office because they are providing staff that have been shadowing me and working with me on social media safety presentations so we can scale out, because I've been doing all of them and I'm one person and we need a lot more people to be able to do that. And so really building the capacity of that work. And then the big thing, which you're going to get more information about in a few weeks, is we're setting up 5 town halls. And so one in each of your district area at one of the major high schools, where we want to invite feeder elementary and middle schools to all come, have an amazing night to really engage and talk about this issue, looking to partner with TCC, the health department, different organizations as well when it comes to mental health and support, and really engage the community through this fall process as we go along. So again, I know I talk fast, but that's what I got for you.
Of board members in these town halls, and are we consulted, or do we know about them?
Not yet, because we're still scheduling them, but we would love, we're hoping to invite you and have you come and just engage as leaders in the community and in supporting this work. I think that allow you to have some dialogues with your constituents as well. So yeah, it's coming.
Mr. Itzen, so thank you. I mean, so much work has gone into this. So, we had a chance when I met with you and Lee to talk about these things, but I kind of have 2 areas of question. And you touched on this in terms of what support will be provided to teachers. Look, at the end of the day, for me, if cell phones are a distraction in the classroom, just because we take cell phones away or don't allow it, doesn't mean that students all of a sudden are going to be engaged and ready to go. All right, the presumption here is that good teaching has to take place, right? So can you talk a little bit more about professional development, support, resources? I'm a teacher, I'm frustrated, whatever I'm doing has not been enough to engage students, and they're on their phones. And now that they don't have their phones, by policy, what happens?
And I love that question, because that is exactly right. That's what we hit, is that, okay, we take this away, now what? Like, what do we do? You want to talk to this one? I'm going to let the teacher talk to this one.
This, of course, is the big concern that we're seeing as teachers is, kind of the motto that we've been working with is, so we've got their attention, now what? I think one of the things is that teachers have been already doing some pretty amazing things in the classroom, even before cell phones. And those strategies work. I mean, they're scientific. They come from a lot of research. Some of you have pioneered some of that research. And so the strategies that I've already been using really, really work. The phones have become a barrier to communicating and engaging with students through those strategies. However, because of the way that the phones have been, involved in this, in the students' kind of hijacking of their limbic system, it will be kind of a shock to expect that these students are no longer able to fidget with their phones in class. What to me this does is reinvigorates a conversation, a chance to think about ways to have our teachers think differently about how they engage with their students, maybe even improving their relationships with their students. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, why do students go to their phones? Nothing really changes. Same as it's always been. Students want to be validated. They want to be recognized. They want to be part of a community. They desire the things that young people have always desired. And the phones provide that just instantaneously in droves. So some of the things that the district is committed to already, building a culture of climate and community, a lot of the proactive behavior management strategies that work a lot with students, with teachers and students. Simple things like building rapport in the classroom, meeting the students at the door, getting to know them on a personal level, having non-adversarial moments to interact with them. These, of course, are things that teachers have always been doing. But in addition to that, because of this new kind of reinvigoration that can happen, we can use the infrastructure that already exists, Canvas modules, the MyPD, even reaching out to department heads during department meetings to establish or even reestablish new support systems that can take place in the classroom as a result of this new type of reinvigorated conversation. So having moments in meetings where we can have best practices, presentations by other teachers, what's working in your classroom to ensure that, like, how are you doing with the cell phone thing? Well, this works for me, maybe it'll work for you. Putting together Canvas modules that have kind of like a treasure trove of immediately actionable practices that can be utilized that day in class to attempt to support the teachers in this new kind of push towards a phone-free classroom. Those are the things as a teacher I would want right away. Those are some of the things I think are sometimes missing when new policies are put forward, is we're kind of, okay, so, we want us to do these things, so what can we do? I think one of the cool things about this policy, the work here, the most important part of this work is that these are the things that are really going to make this policy fly, are these new kinds of ways to think about supporting the teachers in the classroom.
Can I dig a little bit more into that, Lee? And I'm operating on two presumptions. One of them you referenced. Look, at the end of the day, for me, something is happening, whether it's with students in classrooms or with students throughout the day, of how addicting this thing is. All right. So really, I hate to use this reference, but in some ways, we're talking about sort of withdrawal. Like,
Yes.
if I'm on this thing right before school and then continuously after school now, if I'm not going to be allowed to use it during the day of instruction, good teaching is good teaching. So I'm presuming that if you're a great teacher, you wouldn't have as many students in your class distracted. But from time to time, and this has happened, right? I've visited a classroom and a student's having a tough day. A student wasn't able to sleep that night before and is just not all there, right? There's explanations for one or two students like that. But when you have 4, 5, 6 students that are not engaged, my presumption was, well, whether there was, even if they didn't have a cell phone, we need something to engage students, right? So the magnifying factor here for me is then you add the removal of cell phones. Mm-hmm. So I guess, and I'll move that into sort of the second area of questions that I had. So what are the indicators that we want as outcomes? What do we expect or hope will happen now that we're going to implement this policy? And I understand we have to have a policy, state requires it, but I know that that's not the whole reason that we want to move forward on this. So an outcome to me is not students aren't using their cell phones in class. anymore, right? So sort of combining those two, what do we hope happens? But also, I just kind of want to push, like, if students were not engaged, that may be a reason they were on their phones. What magically, yeah, did you want to jump in?
If I may, Dr. Benitez, one of the pieces that we have worked on in OCIPD for the last 2 years is face-to-face training with our teachers as part of quality core instruction. And in that, we have really had a focus on student engagement in lesson planning and supporting teachers in being able to differentiate and scaffold to the users or the students who are in their particular classrooms. So that has been a focus. All of the units themselves have components or different ways in which to engage the content. And so that piece has really been a focus for us, knowing that it's not just about the use of the phone, but it's actually about the use of engaging so that students have meaningful experiences that will allow for them to be able to make meaning of the content so that they can attain those grade level standards.
Sure, and I hate to say it this way, but I can't figure out how to ask or say what I'm trying to say is, my presumption is students are on their phones both because they're addictive, right, by design, not coincidentally. Addictive.
100%.
But at the same time, there's pedagogy and some classroom management that whether there was a phone or not, students may still be distracted or disengaged, right? And my presumption is in classes where a lot of students were distracted and disengaged, taking the phone away doesn't address, whether it's through professional development or support for teachers. So that's the big thing to me. Like, I expect when folks are addicted to things, anxiety rises, right? Attention spans are limited. Like I'm expecting, and so I guess it's 3 questions, Chris. It's okay, what are we looking as indicators for success? How are we gonna operationalize this support and resources, professional development for teachers? But also I would love to not wait till January if we're gonna roll out. I'd love to get some preliminary, you said a couple schools are interested in piloting, there's gonna be these town halls. I think we need to get something like in November if possible, just to see where we're at, what we're seeing at those schools that have already moved forward. Because I worry that in January, with all the communications, all this stuff that's going to happen, that we get information, and I hate to use other policies as an example, but our grading policy, right? A lot of stuff was happening. We voted on the policy, and then we started sort of hearing back, like, there were some challenges, here's some issues that I kind of want to know if we're going to get some update in November or sometime in the fall in relation to the question that I'm asking.
Love it. So I'm going to break some of that down. So that's one thing with Dr. Myers-Miller said that we were intentional about, so like thinking of like the perspective of a teacher and what they're talking about, and knowing, like, I can tell you right now that there are teachers I know that we've been studying that are at some of our schools that piloted this on their own. Teachers who have the boxes where you go in their classroom and you charge your phone, and they are all like, this is fantastic. My kids are engaged. They're seeing it happen in real time. Now, it's not going to be pretty for a lot of people right away. And none of this policy is a pie in the sky, like, we're going to do this and it's all going to be great. It's going to be hard. But the benefit over time is amazing. And so we've been really instrumental in going to OCAPD and saying, you're already doing this. We had a lot of conversations about QCI, but then even talking to the curriculum leads and saying, okay, now remember, we're about to take this away from kids. What are we infusing instead? And I think that second part is what matters more. It's really not about what's taking away. That's even in us being so cautious in doing this, was instead of just saying we're banning phones tomorrow, which other districts have done, that's a dangerous precedent, right? We need to prepare for this process to move them into this work. The addiction science shows that kids become kids again real quick, but they need that high quality instruction to be able to do that. And how do we're even looking at beyond the operationalized from a communication standpoint, how are we showcasing best practices and exemplars and teachers that are doing really great things, even across the district, so that's there. When it comes to the measurement, we don't fully know yet, right, what that's going to look like. In a perfect world, I would say violence decreases. We have less issues of cyberbullying. Test scores go up. College and career readiness index gets better. AP scores get better over time. Of course, that's going to take time to see what that looks like, but we want to start measuring now, right, and seeing what's our baseline and keep working on that. I mean, I've said this to you before. I sit in these meetings with you all every month and I listen to our stats and where we're at, and I firmly, wholeheartedly believe that this is one of the major issues causing this problem. We're going to see that turnaround, and so it's going to be figuring out how to measure that, and that's also working directly with our research office to say, what metrics do we need to look at? How can you help us with that? And Dr. Madrigal and I have already started to have those conversations, and we would love to come back versus the purview of leadership at any time and have this conversation, because as like I said to you before, this is the beginning of a 20-year process. I mean, this is shifting the culture, at the end of the day. So it's going to take a long time to see what this looks like over time.
Yeah, and I think one of the background documents that you provided, this is the last thing I'll say, referenced increase in test scores, right, with one of the studies in one of the background documents. So again, if we can front end that and be like, okay, here are some indicators, whether they're preliminary or not, in alignment with our board goals, let's say, that would be helpful.
I just wanted to say that I do believe that the policy will limit distractions in the classroom, because I actually think that cell phones in the classroom tend to distract students who don't have their cell phones out. So I think we are going to see a shift with the new policy. So thank you for all of your work.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. And that's a huge part. Like we talked a lot about like anti-smoking in California, right? And if you go, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when people smoked all over the place. My parents smoked in the house. Now when I smell a cigarette outside, I'm like, oh my gosh, who's doing that? Like it's offensive. What if we can get to a point where another child says, you're affecting my education by having that phone out? That bothers me. How do we build that culture and identity and get our teachers to build that as well? You're so right in that. And even thinking about, yes, was tobacco limited in California because of major regulation and taxes? Sure, but also as a massive communications campaign to get society to realize, like, hey, this is really bad for you, right? And so even mimicking some of those strategies as well.
And that's what I wanted to bring up a little bit. So as you were talking about, you grew up in the 1900s like I did, right? So you remember all the crazy campaigns like Just Say No or Dare, right? And I'm not saying that they were or were not effective. I mean, they are what they are. But the fact of the matter is that I can remember them being very palpable campaigns to reduce kids from going into gangs, to reduce acts of violence, to reduce the usage of drug use, to
And none of those things happen.
no, but my point in all this is that there were major resources, there were major activities that were put around some of these negative impacts on kids. And I guess when I think about this campaign as we're talking about it, I'd be curious to see some of the early activities that we're talking about to kind of do some of that early endorsement. I guess the reason why I'm bringing this up, and maybe this is more of an Eric thing than this is a district thing, but I've always been a firm believer than taking an excitement approach from a marketing standpoint than a punitive approach, right? And I think that when you talk about like maybe the failures of Dare or the failures of Just Say No, is that all due respect, yes, they did talk about the negative impacts that joining a gang and drug use can use, but they were also, in some strange way, almost like celebrating it for those that may or may not have come from some of the, or put it like this, if you came from my neighborhood, some of the kids thought it was kind of cool, like, hey man, that guy kind of looks like Tupac that they're trying to keep me away from, right? And so I think that when we're talking about the marketing of the cell phone use, I'd be curious to see some of it on the early half, just because I'm curious if we'll take a more like punitive, just say no approach to cell phones, or are we finding a way to make it like, hey, we're concerned about your mental health, we're concerned about your attention spans in these classrooms, and these are some of the approaches that we know will work. One of the biggest ones will be removing the cell phones during learning times. Right?
Yes, and that's 100% our entire approach, is that, first of all, we talk about being culturally relevant and responsive in this district. Like, are we taking that approach? I'm a product of the Dare time. It was not culturally relevant or responsive at all, right? It taught you about every drug, and that was about it. That was not the answer, right? So how do we learn from those mistakes and say, how are we talking to kids? And I'll give you an example. You know how like a comedian goes out and like tests material before they do a big show? We've been testing presentations across this district for the last 3 years and seeing what's landing with kids, talking to them about tripping on the truth. One thing that I love is when I go out and talk to kids about the attention economy and how they're getting ripped off by these companies, and then it's affecting their mental health. And when you see the aha in some of their eyes, like, wait, what? Like getting them to understand that, right? That we talk about uplifting student voice and really connecting with kids. We need to meet them where they're at, meet parents where they're at, meet teachers where they're at. You know, all like when I go talk to teachers, it's easy for me to say cell phones can be bad. They're going to be, yeah, so what? What do we do now? Where does engagement strategies come in? Whatever. So each audience is going to have a particular different strategy, but you're absolutely right. And we've talked about, I mean, contests are huge in any movement. So we're talking about countdowns and contests and what can we look at encouraging our ASB directors and different leaders across the district to be able to figure out what are things that are working at your school that might work over here. That's the tact that we're taking.
Mr. Miller, right now that you're mentioning I guess the public service campaigns that were referenced, but they're attached to policy, right, at the end of the day. Among the many issues and challenges, and folks on the ground knew this, but then the research after these policies were enacted showed this, coming back to my indicators where we can look at for indicators of success, is that enforcement of these policies was also inequitable. And it criminalized large segments of our communities of color, of our poor communities. So I guess this was more sort of to the team, to the superintendent. You know, we fall into also the dangers of equitably enforcing this policy, right? We've had issues and challenges with other policies, our uniform policy, things like that. So I don't want that to be lost, right? That this is only as effective as ensuring that, you know, students understand the dangers, the pitfalls, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to enforce, right? If someone's pulling out their phone, this is the third time, what happens? And then if we're disproportionately only enforcing it on subgroups of students, then it magnifies the issue at hand.
Yep.
And so, moving past the marketing/campaign component of it, I too just wanted to piggyback on the statement that Dr. Benitez was speaking to when it comes to my famous line of what does success look like, right? When we talk about the measuring of success when it comes to the implementation of this policy, all due respect, though I do recognize that how tangentially it'll help improve kids' attention spans in classrooms and how it will tangentially improve the scoring of or SBAC scores, et cetera, et cetera. I think that when it comes to this campaign independently, the success and the measure of it should be looked at independently, not tangentially. So how do we measure that? I don't know if it's core surveys saying from a teacher's perspective, what was your perspective on the reduction of usage of phones compared to last year to this year? I think are more indicative of a success measure than maybe some of these tangential.
You're 100% right, and I know we're running out of time, but to that point, you know, we're on our H3 team that's working on reimagining high schools. We talk about like what is college and career readiness. Yes, we have a dashboard and stuff, but what does that really mean? That's been a constant conversation, right? Are we really preparing students? Their social, emotional well-being, their mental health is a huge part of this as well. And so we're already in talks with the new culture and climate leadership teams that are going to be formed at our schools to making this work part of their work as well. So they're actually helping support this to see what it looks like. Looking at, can we add into the core survey? How are we engaging students? Because you're right, a test score is one metric. It's not enough. And so what are the comprehensive amount of metrics that we can look at?
Well, it's just about time for us to move on. But I want to thank you for the presentation. I know this is not our first look at this issue, and it won't be our last. I do want to uplift the fact that your implementation on this will be after an educational campaign. So for those teachers who may want to start the year with some sort of their own, you know, classroom policy or whatever. We're not preventing them from doing that. They can go right ahead and start the year with their own policy. But I believe that in order to make this successful, we have to have buy-in from the parents, from the teachers, and I appreciate the fact that as per Chris Eftehu, we will be educating our way, maybe not out of an issue, but into this particular cell phone, policy. So before we go on to the next agenda item, we're going to have a 5-minute break. So I'm checking my phone for the correct time only and putting it down. It's 9:30 now, so we will reconvene at 9:35. A very quick 5-minute thing, but thank you very much. It's a little hectic because we are playing musical chairs, as it were. But I have heard from our sound booth that we need to make a better effort to speak into the microphone. That will assist our interpreters. So if everybody would make the effort to use the microphones in such a way where the interpreters can hear, that would be much appreciated. So let's go ahead and get started on our effective monitoring. So I will turn it over to Dr. Baker.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the time that has already been spent engaged in learning about our social media and cell phone policy. We're going to do a little changing direction and beginning a process around effective monitoring. You have a number of materials that were in your board workshop and your evening board meeting that I want to call attention to just before I even get us set up that we'll be using. There were several readings attached to the workshop agenda titled Effective Goal Monitoring, Effective Question Asking, and Technical versus Tactical versus Strategic. So I'll call your attention to have those nearby. And then in the evening agenda, in your new business items, you have 3 goal monitoring reports. We are going to use those as learning content today. So if you will identify them, they have a cover sheet that names what the goal monitoring report is. It says Progress Monitoring Report. One says Interim Goal 1A, Foundational Reading Skills. The next says Interim Goal 1B, Fluency Assessment. And the third says Interim Goal 2B, Fluency Assessment. So if you will have those out in front of you and take a minute just to take your time, get your materials out, and staff, please support anyone in your group that needs a little bit of assistance. And then, yeah.
And you know, I think before we go on, I just want to mention that the monitoring process is a learning journey, a journey that we're going on together as staff and board. And as our coaching would tell us, it comes down to practice, practice, practice. So for staff, it's a matter of the types of monitoring reports. And then for us as board members, what questions should we be asking? Because at some point we are going to be rating ourselves on the effectiveness on the questions we ask, whether they're technical, tactical. Are we asking questions in advance, which we haven't gotten there yet. But as I said, it's a learning journey that we are all taking together. So let's give ourselves some grace as we do this. And it might be a little bit, a little bit of a bumpy road, might be a little bit awkward, but we're going to do this together. And at some point, we'll get to where it's a smoother road.
Thank you. You took my first word. Appreciate that. And just to add to what you said about learning, a learning journey requires bumps in the road and for us to learn both from mistakes and things that we learn along the way. So just really appreciate you setting that up for us, President Craighead. I also, in preparation for today, reviewed different notes that I've taken as we've practiced, as we've been in our implementation team meetings, and I can definitely say we are on an incredible learning journey with many bright spots that have taken place over the last 6 months. And so soon you'll be digging into the documents in a working session, different than perhaps maybe someone teaching a lesson and then engaging in that way. You're going to, in small groups, look through the materials, especially with a focus on what comes to you tonight for a recommendation that you approve the first 3 monitoring reports. But before you do that, we would want to slow down today and remind ourselves about what effective monitoring looks like and do some practicing. So thank you for that setup. When I think of a new fiscal year, a new school year, I also come to you realizing there is a lot of new in this process. So in the last couple of months, you have approved a new monitoring calendar that extends the extent of the goals, which is a requirement of this process. The board approved annual targets for its goals. Staff brought forward interim goals. And we are kicking off a very important new monitoring process, which actually should feel very different starting tonight. And I say that because sometimes different can feel uncomfortable. And so to your point, give ourselves grace as staff, as board members, and just allow the different to feel perhaps clunky and that we're going to have to do some learning to get to a place that we are able to say that we are effectively monitoring. In June, there was a session that Greg facilitated for us that was about effective monitoring. So we are going to be dipping into those same materials. Can review that session. Anybody who wants to look back at that can review those materials. We're going to dip back into those materials, and then we're going to go a step further with the now monitoring calendar approved, annual targets. We're going to be looking at effective question asking and preparing not just for tonight, but actually the model of a monitoring report comes with some additional requirements for board members and the request of the kinds of questions you would ask ahead of a board meeting, and then the kinds of questions that will make good dialogue in a board meeting. So we're actually going to do some practicing of that. And we're also going to be labeling tonight's monitoring reports for the components of an effective monitoring report. Since June, or in the month of June, we have had a weekly student outcome focused implementation team meeting, which 2 board members, Mr. Miller and Mrs. Craighead, have been participating in with our coach. And so part of the learning occurs in that setting and tracking on our implementation timeline. And I think this board can be proud of the progress that has been made on the implementation timeline. We also, and I just want to take a moment to highlight the team, both who are in the room, and Dr. Madrigal, I see Hamina Lalani behind us, and all who support in the research office, along with Brian Moskowitz, our chief academic officer. They are participating in a staff cohort that is helping to us to not just reimagine, but to think about quality monitoring reports and what it means to actually monitor board goals and guardrails. They had a recent experience this week where they got to share the 3 monitoring reports that come before you tonight. And it was a highlight of the cohort meeting that Long Beach's monitoring reports were exceptional and seen as an exemplar for the cohort group to really think about their district monitoring reports. And so just really, you can also feel very proud of the learning we're doing, and also that learning is pushing us in ways that are new and different and may make us feel, including myself, may make us feel uncomfortable in a new process, but we're learning together. So just want to acknowledge that. All right, so tonight, this morning, we're going to spend just about, we've got about 40 minutes. We're going to do some quick learning and then continue in the months ahead. We'll do 3 things. We're going to review key aspects of effective goal monitoring, going back into some of the student outcome focused governance materials. We're going to get you all ready to think about your self-evaluation today that you will be doing next. And then we're going to dig into effective question asking, the purpose of questions and the kinds of questions that get asked. And then we're going to practice putting it all together by pulling those, at least one, but I'm hoping that the 3 monitoring reports for tonight, you have some Post-it notes and you'll spend a little bit of time labeling the aspects of an effective monitoring report, and then we'll practice some question asking based on our conversations today. All right, good to go? Okay. So staff and board members, you have a note-taking device. It is the one large sheet that I set in front of you. This is really an invitation for how to organize where you place your notes and how you're processing your learning from today. The side that we're going to start with, ask the question on the left-hand side, the first question being, what is student outcome focused governance goal monitoring? And then the second question being, how is goal monitoring beneficial to the organization? So the first thing I'd like to do, and I'm gonna do some quick stop talking and point to your groups to use the materials in front of you. I'm going to call your attention to the document that says effective goal monitoring at the top. This was in your board materials for workshop. If you will reread just the first couple of paragraphs, and then I'm just going to give us a few minutes. You can use your note-taking device if you'd like to take notes as a way to capture. You have some highlighters that are placed at your place if you'd like to use that, and some post-it notes if you'd prefer that, to answer those two questions in small group. And this is just elevating these back into the space. What is student outcome focused governance goal monitoring? And also, how does it benefit not just the goals themselves, but the organization? So a quick read and then a short discussion, and I'm watching the clock closely, so I'm gonna call you back in 5 minutes. Right? All right, second prompt for you all in your small groups is to, if you'll turn to page 2 of the Effective Monitoring Guide, this is part of the Student Outcome Focused Governance Manual, is to spend just a couple of minutes, again, I'm going to give you 5 and then bring you back together, on roles of superintendent and staff. I'm going to say participation. So what does it look like if there is effective superintendent participation? And what does it look like if there is effective board member participation in effective monitoring practices? So again, draw from the resource that is there. Assuming everybody's done a read, then you can quickly get into discussion. And then I'll bring you back together in 5 minutes and we'll get right towards monitoring. Yeah. Taking one last minute to finish up this part of the conversation. Okay, I'm going to prompt you one more time related to effective monitoring. So last prompt before we explore questions is using your note-taking device to just at a very high level explore the 3 phases of monitoring, which are before and in preparation for monitoring, during a monitoring session, and then after a monitoring session. And just remind yourselves of these 3 phases and what some of the elements that take place in each of those 3 phases is, and especially paying attention to some things that will be newer. For example, before and preparation for, we're aiming to have as part of the monitoring report questions that are asked by board members ahead of time and then answered ahead of time to save time in the meeting for strategic questions. So that might be something that you note in before or in preparation for. So take a few minutes to look at those 3 phases and just make note of the 3 phases and what happens in each of those phases. If you will finish your last thought, then we're going to be digging into question asking. Okay, so for those of you who are using your note catcher, you can turn to the back side of it. And then if you'll call upon two handouts that you have, one titled Effective Question Asking, the other starts with technical versus tactical. So I'm hoping that in our small groups we'll spend, and this is going to go quickly, knowing that this is not a one-time experience, that we will continue to come back to this. But the top of your note catcher calls us to think about reasons that we ask questions, which are quickly defined in the Student Outcome Focused Governance handout, as well as the kinds of SMART questions, slightly different than SMART goals, Mr. Miller, but related. And then asking us to think about technical, tactical, and strategic. So I'm going to give you a few more minutes, so probably about 7 minutes, and watching the clock. I think it would be time best spent discerning among the three kinds of questions that that second handout. So if you'll make quick work of like the background. Why do we ask questions? How do we think about the reasons for them? And then quickly get to technical, tactical, and strategic so that you have a way to look also at the monitoring reports that we're going to have tonight and practice in making a technical, a tactical, and a strategic question related to tonight's monitoring reports. That's where we're heading. So about 7 minutes on the top, and then we will, I'll get you right into the monitoring reports themselves so we can start to do some labeling and some digging in. I'm going to call you back together in just a moment, so finish your last thought, and then I have one last task for us to do together. The first thing is there any collective learning in your group that you'd want to share, an insight or something that has really come up in your learning experience so far? Anything from the groups that you'd like to share?
Well, we talked about the process of asking questions prior to the meeting where the monitoring report is given, and we talked about the logistics of where those questions will live, who will answer those questions, the timing, when do we need those questions in advance of the meeting, when can we expect the answers. And so there's a lot more involved, and that's why we're acknowledging the learning process here, because there's so much to every little part.
Yes, thank you.
On that note, we also discussed the questions, right? And one of the things that I brought up is that, especially with the new board bylaws, that you turn them in ahead of time. The challenge, and I'll speak for myself personally, is that I read everything, and picking up of the board packet and actually going through it, it takes me every night before the board meeting, my weekends, and up until the night before to read the material. And so it is just absolutely, for me, not doable to submit questions in advance. I can submit a few, but that's one of the biggest challenges, right? So, and on top of that, if you're in a meeting and based on the discussion or something just came up, then you have other questions that you want to ask, then, those just come up. But I think that the biggest challenge is having the time to read through everything, and it is doable if we get the packet 2 weeks in advance.
Well, I think another way that we can look at that, because I agree that there's a lot of material, especially with some agendas more so than others. This agenda was very information heavy. There were, the purchasing and contract report alone had 119 items on it, which is a little bit longer than we usually have. And I'm thinking if you have a system where you are reading certain parts of the packet each night, maybe prioritize the monitoring report. Read that one first and then come up with questions. But there's nothing that says that we can't ask questions in the moment, even if we ask questions ahead of time. And this is the coaching that we've been receiving from Greg on our weekly meetings. He is instilling in us the value in asking questions ahead of time so that staff can be prepared, because sometimes they don't have the information that we want in the moment, but it will take time to get that information. So that's one of the reasons that it would be beneficial to ask questions ahead of time. But even if those questions are asked in advance, we can still ask them in the moment, which probably is a good practice, so that it's even more public when we're discussing something. And if you have a question that you didn't submit prior to the meeting, you can go ahead and ask that, because it's all about the learning. And so we should not feel as though we're limited as far as the questions we can ask.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I still think that 2 weeks, if getting the board packet 2 weeks before would facilitate, submitting those questions, because it would really entail spending the first 3 nights and, going through as much information as possible just to submit those questions. I just really think that for those of us who do read everything, it does take, it would be a challenge. And so more time with the packet would be
Yeah,
good.
and actually, just this week in our implementation team meeting, our weekly implementation team meeting, Hamina, Lalani, and Dr. Madrigal shared actually with the new monitoring calendar, as it has now been established, some adjustments that we may be coming to you to make to establish more days where you may not get the entire board packet, but you would get the monitoring reports earlier. And believe it or not, and just credit to Hamina, there's an entire spreadsheet just if we move one date, that everything moves in a spreadsheet. So we're working on that. We're not ready to ask you to revise the monitoring calendar yet, but it may be something in the next couple of months that we come back and explore with you all. To your point, not necessarily the entire board packet, but at least the monitoring reports with some additional time.
Jill, thank you for that. I think one of the premises that I'm operating under, so team, please correct me if I'm either wrong or this isn't an understanding, is that my interpretation of asking questions ahead of time is more for the technical, tactical
Yes,
questions,
that is correct.
right?
Yes.
But it also relates to effective use of our time at the meeting. So in terms of my organization of thoughts, and I appreciate something that Jack shared. If we're gonna do the homework, we also want to maximize. Okay, it's a lot, even if we all did the homework to try and cover in one meeting at one time. So there's one element there, right? Just effectively like, okay, what are the strategic questions that wouldn't make sense to ask ahead of time because it requires it's a dialogue
Discussion, yes.
Right? The premise here is how do we keep the conversation going, not how do we limit the conversation, with the thought being that we want to be cognizant that we don't have any I got you governance, right? Like, oh, you can't answer that question that I asked right now at the moment. There's also this, Jill, I'm going to be really candid here just from my perspective. If we're effective at getting packets 2 weeks in advance, having opportunities to check in with the team, having a lot of our questions answered, we may not have a lot of questions during the presentations and reports. And most of our communities probably are not going to read the shared document of the back and forth responses and answers. So in the spirit of transparency, it may be important to either re-ask a question that has already been asked and or really be thoughtful and thorough on, hey, most of our communities are probably not going to read these documents, but they're there, which is important just in case. But, you know, I also have to think through, okay, if I asked 30 questions ahead of time, I also want to make sure the community knows, hey, I'm asking the questions that uphold community's vision for success, and then the accountability to, if we're not going to have any conversation and we're just going to vote on accepting the monitoring report, it puts us in this juxtaposition that if we're effective of asking questions ahead of time, then maybe potentially fewer questions get asked, but then community doesn't know whether we're actually holding our system accountable to these very important critical priorities.
Yeah, I think there are several ways that we'll learn our way into that. One is when you look at, I mean, you probably already looked at it, but when we go into the progress monitoring report, the last page is being saved for primarily technical and tactical questions that are asked ahead of time, which might even include some links and other things because it will be live on the website as part of the board materials. There could be reference. We could determine a routine that is like, when the monitoring report comes up, either a board member or staff first talks to the questions that are answered in the report, and we could elevate those just to say, you're looking for these kinds of answers, here are things board members asked ahead of time, which would then do part of what you're saying. They could be repeated. We talked about that, so that the strategic questions and discussion are what you get to spend your time doing. So yeah, creating some routines I think is going to be helpful.
I learned relatively early that the limitations are not just getting it done, because things change and things become important, or they're on the agenda, and to try and get, I thought, well, let's give it to us a month in advance, and that's impossible because of all the changes that that are going on or things that must be dealt with. And so the question is, how much is enough? I mean, I love the format of what we got. This one, it was very different. That's the good news. And I was fascinated. In fact, I got up in the middle of the night and read through it. And my wife said, "That's great. What's on the agenda?" And I said, "I can't remember. I read it at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I have to do this again." But I think we're all on the same page as to what the goal is. And the goal is to get the materials in enough time so that we can digest it, come up with questions, and then it becomes a question of how and when to answer those questions. I know there's been discussion about maybe a couple of packets of information that we get that we say, well, these we can do real quickly and get that out to you right away, but the other ones could take longer, and we need more time to reflect on that, because I agree with you, Juan, that it's very important, and pet peeve of mine, that the community knows that we're engaged and how we're engaged. And I've said it a bunch of times, the National Civic League works with school boards and city councils and whatnot about how to make those conversations in public more meaningful, so that people understand what it is that we actually do, and it isn't just kind of a mystery. And I think that this is we're working on it, and I understand that we're going to have some things that are presented that will help us do that.
Quick ask, Dr.
Yeah.
Beaker,
Mhm.
just related to what Doug said, and I was having an earlier conversation with Jeff. It may be a good idea to remind our community members really of two things. In case folks notice that our agendas look different and stuff, that we're making a shift also to diligent. And because, and I did this last night, I was looking for stuff online, and I went to Board Docs again and realized that on Board Docs, our stuff isn't on Board Docs anymore. So I think there should be some communication to our community reminder today that meetings, board materials, the look of things. I actually like that we have a direct link right off of our website, but it took Jeff reminding me this morning that we're shifting over, right, and learning our way into this new platform.
I see Elvia Khanna sitting behind me taking notes, so wonderful to have her in the room relative to communications. Yeah, thank you. All right, so here is your test. This is putting it all together. Time 1, you have 3 monitoring reports that are on tonight's agenda. If you'll notice, mine are all tabbed up. So I took myself through all of the exercises that I'm going to ask you to do. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to start with 1A, interim goal 1A, or actually it really doesn't matter which one you start with. The goal would be, if you could quickly tab all 3 of them with a few things, I think it will help tonight to go more smoothly. So what I'd like you to tab is, there are 4 in your handout, back to the original effective goal monitoring handout on the student outcome focused, in the student outcome focused materials. The top of page 2 calls you to 4 things that must be in an effective monitoring report: the goal, the data, the interpretation, the evidence, and the plan. So you have some Post-it notes around you. I think it would be helpful to look at the report with your staff member and to tab with Post-it note. If you prefer to highlight or write on it, go for it. Those 4 aspects of an effective monitoring report. I can tell you with confidence today, they're all there. And these were model reports in this week's Student Outcome Focused Governance cohort. And so they are all there. You will be able to find them. And then best case scenario, that for at least one of the reports, you practice writing a technical, a tactical, and a strategic question related to the topic. So you probably already looked at the data and the report. Now, what would it look like to practice writing a technical, a tactical, which has just been discussed as mostly asking ahead? And they would be on that last page of the report that you'll see that says questions. That's where those would then be answered and appear both for the board meeting and the public. And then what might you ask that's a strategic question? You have another resource that was with your large note-taking device. It's straight from the Student Outcome Focused Governance Manual. It is questions. It's the reminder about the 4 aspects of an effective monitoring report. It's the performance-oriented questions, the current performance. So if you're thinking about strategic, you might want to think about how those current performance questions could show up. And then just a reminder I was going to say cheat sheet, but I'll say reference. The aspects of ineffective question right from the manual are there at the bottom. Okay, so the last task, and your staff who are supporting you will work this through with you. When you've got at least one progress monitoring report labeled and a question for each, then give me an alert, because I want everyone to have at least one. And if you can get all 3 labeled and done, that would be extra credit since we're in an educational setting. All right, go for it, and I will watch the clock to bring closure in about 10-ish minutes. In just a moment, I'm going to ask staff from your groups to share the grade that you give your board member or board members for their work today. Just kidding. Just to share how do we do in terms of getting ourselves ready for tonight's first new monitoring session and monitoring report. So as you finish your conversation, I'll ask for insight from lead team members to share something that is taking back to staff on what you experienced today and what we might need to continue to build on tonight and or into future sessions. You want to go first, Ryan?
Something I appreciate about just our conversation, it's happened a couple of times this morning, and the public will see this as we're looking at the monitoring reports tonight, that there's this nuance between, there's on track and off track, but then there's this nuance of you're off track, but you're actually making growth. And what does that mean to be making growth but not quite where you are versus off track and actually not making growth at all? And so it's a good conversation. I actually look forward to tonight engaging more in that conversation because I think there's, as the public, they see these reports, there's so much story behind the numbers themselves. And so just an opportunity in the discussions around the monitoring reports, those strategic questions and answers that I think will be really powerful.
Thank you. One of you want to share? Staff member insights or what you think we need to further build on in our learning from your perspective?
So we took a look at interim goal 2B. And we were specifically exploring a little bit more of the goal itself because we are looking at students in grade 4 and 5 who were not met on the prior year. And so as we moved into the different types of questions, we specifically spent a little time talking about some technical questions as well as some tactical questions around for the students with managing some of the, we'll just say, enhancement type things that we have like music as well as art. When we think of all of the ways that students get pulled and participate in a variety of different things, how much time are the students actually spending in small group instruction? How much, how do we maximize specifically the time in small group instruction for our students who are not met? And so we were talking about the types of questions and then the uniqueness in this particular interim goal and how we could better support our students so that we can get to on track.
Thank you. All right. Team Brown, Madrigal, and On, who is speaking for your group?
I guess I'll speak. I got the look. And the mic. So we had a really good conversation around just the visualization of the data and how that can also inform us in thinking about strategic questions. The visual, it's easy just to look at the numbers and make some inferences around why data is looking or trending in a certain way. But then when we think about the strategic question, we think about like, well, what are some of the changes that maybe internally we've made, for example, with our foundational reading skills assessment? There has been a lot of work and collaboration with different departments as well as teachers around what are we measuring and what we're measuring, is that appropriate for the different grade levels? And also that we've identified that previously some of our groups of kids that are taking the FIRSA have made a significant growth by December. And so we've made decisions around, are these cut points appropriate? Do we make adjustments to ensure that we really are measuring kids at the right time around the specific skills that we've taught? So strategic questions can build on just the visualization of the data, but asking questions of staff to get more of that information on what are we doing internally is key, because that is not going to necessarily be displayed by the data.
Thank you. We also went kind of high level and then down into some of the details, understanding the components of an effective monitoring report, and then practicing with questions and thinking about how the strategic questions guide the interaction of board members in their discussion to get to an effective monitoring report. Really good thinking about roles and responsibilities and the relationships around all of us being a part of the conversation. I was sharing with Eric and Doug also about behind the scenes, the contribution to the monitoring report, that those closer to the work will be contributing in a way that is part of a system. And while a system is hard to get up and running and involves a lot of dates and deadlines, what we believe is that we're going to be elevating the insights, not just the data itself, the insights from those working in the field, in classrooms that are working with teachers to really bring a more whole story to the board report. So really, really good conversation, and we've got good practice questions written.
Jill, just a quick comment on the last thing you shared, and Brian and I touched base on this very little today, so I think there's an opportunity for conversation in our session later this evening. So again, as I understand these monitoring reports, we're basically checking off, does it have this? Does it have that? Does it have that? And if we are on track and or off track but making progress, I think there's a different disposition there, at least for me. So when we got these, I was looking for, okay, for strategic questions, sort of root cause analysis. All right, so and Brian kind of quickly he's like part of it's actually here. So if the anticipation is that we are on track at some point, or at least off track but making progress, and that these monitoring reports sort of become standard, my questions are around, okay, so then how do we keep the conversation going if what we're doing is just accept? I mean, my understanding is we're just accepting this. It's got everything that we're looking for it. We may not have a lot of questions today. I mean, that may take some time for us to finesse. But again, at some point, if we're making progress and or are on track, sort of those strategic questions to me then become, okay, so then what are we, like, what strategy is working the best here? Sort of what, that's sort of how I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, I appreciate that one. And there's a resource that was provided for you. Again, this is straight from the manual, just putting it in our, with our materials behind it so you can see it. But so yes, there are components that you're checking off. Are they there? I think the strategic questions, especially living in that current performance state, allow you to bring a lot of curiosity and wondering that relates to the current performance into the board discussion. There's an obvious, which is this model talks about ineffective questions, that perhaps there's, discerning between opinions, suggestions, all of that is considered ineffective. But asking, what is happening? What do you know about the data? Where are there some schools where you're seeing a different outcome than others? Like, that is strategically an opportunity for conversation with our team, and asking, what do you believe is leading to this? And that's more, I'll say, below the report, but for great conversation where you get to sit in a room and be curious and learn more than just what the report itself represents. So I imagine that being an exciting conversation for us to get to share more based on your curiosity at the strategic level.
And by the same token, I'm looking at my colleagues here. If we're not seeing that we're on track or not making progress, my assumption is also we shouldn't be seeing the same next steps.
Right. Yes. Well, I want to thank you for a really good working session today. Hopefully you've got labeled materials. Your progress monitoring reports, if you took them out of your binder, should go back into your evening materials so you know where they are tonight. And the other materials that were used this morning are good references, especially the one with current performance questions may be helpful to you tonight. And with that, we will take another break to reset. Board members, you'll be going back to your board seat for the next presentation. So as Mrs. Craighead does, it's 11:03. We're slightly behind schedule, so let us say at 11:08 if we can restart. Again, there are refreshments in the kitchen, and then we'll be back at 11:08.
officially behind schedule, and we have 2 more items to get to. So this next item is our quarterly self-evaluation. This is something that we have been doing with our student outcome focused governance, this approach to board governance. It's not new to us. We conducted our first quarterly evaluation last December, and then again in March, I believe, with the help of our coach. This morning, we're going to be doing it ourselves as a board, which makes perfect sense because it is a self-evaluation. So we're going to jump right in, and I will just mention to my colleagues that we are behind schedule. So, yeah. So let's try and move through this as efficiently as we can. So we will start with the vision and goals. That is the first domain in the evaluation. So in the left column, we refer to it as red, but it's not really red. It's more of a I don't know, like a salmon. We'll go, yeah, we'll go salmon. I don't know. But anyhow, so if any of these things are true in this column, then we won't be earning points in this domain. But can we agree that everything in this column is false? So
Yes. Yes.
that'll help us move on in the interest and time. So in the next column, approaching student outcomes focus, let's go down this list and see if we've accomplished these things. So the first one is the board has adopted in collaboration with the superintendent goals. Yes. The board has adopted only SMART goals that include a specific measure, population starting point and ending point.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. The board has, I like this, this is good.
You can just go and say, does anyone think we didn't do anything in here? And then we can go to the next one.
You like that part? Okay, I will take that suggestion and does anybody think there's something in this column that we have not done? No. So right out of the gate, it looks like we're giving ourselves at least 10 points here.
Yep.
Okay, so then I'm going to move to the next column. That's clearly green. Maybe not so clear, but it's green. So we'll start out. I'll use the same. I'll use the same suggestion. Is there anything in this column that we have not accomplished? In that case, we have accomplished
25 points.
25 out of the gate. First thing this morning, I'm going to take a moment. Because I will remind you, up until this moment, we have not earned any points. So right now, first page, we have earned 25 points. Yes. So the far right column in the blue, I'm going to read these because I'm not sure if we're here yet, but
I don't think we've done those, Madam Chair. Just trying to speed us up here.
okay. So if that's okay with everyone else, yeah, I don't think
we haven't done root cause analysis. We haven't ensured that students, parents, and staff, the community members have expressed ownership of our adopted goals.
Okay, so these are things that need to happen.
Unless someone disagrees that we have done.
Right, okay. Anybody disagree? Anybody thinks, yep, we've done these things, or any of these things? Okay, then that's...
We want to give you a little credit for the second one, just so, but in terms of the totality of all three of those, not mastered, so.
Okay, so the second one, all the interim goals, and that's thanks to staff on that one. So thank you, staff, because the second part there is, because of staff, that's been accomplished. So I think for vision and goals, our total is 25. So okay, well done, everybody. And you know what, that's a collective
That's right.
win, because we cannot get there without staff. We cannot get there without our superintendent. So thank you, everybody. All right, the next page, and domain, values, and guardrails. So in the far left column in the salmon, as we're calling it, are any of these things true?
No.
And the answer should be no. I think it's no. So we're going to move to the next column. This next column is approaching student outcomes focus. I'm going to look down this column and see, I think we've accomplished these things. Do I have agreement there, or would somebody disagree? Ms. Lopez, you disagree with?
I'm just saying, give us a little time to go through them, and I think that there's some value in. I know they're up posted, but just reading a couple of them for the public.
Okay, I'll read these then. The board has adopted, in collaboration with the superintendent, guardrails based on the community's values and that do not hinder pursuit of the goals. Each guardrail describes a single operational action or class of actions the superintendent may not use or allow in pursuit of the goals. We've done that. That was part of our initial work. The board has adopted no fewer than 1 and no more than 5 guardrails. And fewer guardrails allow for more focus, more allow for less. We've done that. The superintendent has adopted, in collaboration with the board, 1 to 3 interim guardrails for each guardrail, and each interim guardrail is SMART. And thank you, because that has been taken care of. The status of each interim guardrail is able to be updated multiple times during each school year. And yes, on that one, the board publicly posted the guardrails for public comment prior to adoption. So yes, we've done that. So if we are all in agreement, that's another 5 points. So, okay. Moving to the green column, or meeting student outcomes focused. The superintendent has provided interim guardrail ending points for each year leading up to the ending date. I believe that's taken place. I'm getting nods and thumbs up. All interim guardrails pertain to outputs or outcomes, not inputs. Yes. The board included students, parents, staff, and community members in the guardrail development process. Yes, we did our community meetings prior to that.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, can I ask how staff, I guess I was thinking outside of this building, and students were involved?
Involved in the creation of the guardrails? Yes. Well, the board conducted community meetings prior to setting the goals and the guardrails, and that process kind of aligned and coincided with our Vision 2035, and so we were really had the advantage of a lot of input from the community.
Yes, I agree. We did get the input from the community. I'm asking about staff, like teachers outside of, educators outside of this building, and students. If I may have missed it, but how did we involve them in the development of the guardrails?
We kicked off the visioning process with the student summit. So there was 750 students that came in as the kickoff to the visioning process. And then some of them actually were involved in the guiding coalition. And then there were teachers from schools involved in the guiding coalition as well. As one, yeah.
And that was part of the guardrails?
Yes, the goals and guardrails were derived from that process.
Yeah. Okay, and this next one, the board has considered adoption of 1 or more theories of action to drive the school system's overall strategic direction.
We haven't done that yet.
Actually, as I was talking to our coach, he reminded me that when we first met with AJ back in October of 2020, we had a conversation about the theories of action. And this bullet point says the board considered, and that is the key word in that bullet point, considered. We had a conversation with AJ about theories of action, and at that time, we decided not to pursue that. But we did have that conversation where it was considered.
The way I remember that conversation, Madam Chair, is that example theories of action were presented to us, and he said, if you guys want, as I remember, if you guys want to do something like this, we could do something like this. We decided not to at that time do something like that. But I don't remember the theories of action being proposed as, would you guys want to use this one or two of these theories of action for us to consider adoption?
So because we didn't specifically consider, okay, so, well, in your opinion, then we haven't actually done that.
I don't think we actually specifically did that. I do remember theories of action as examples being shared with us, but I don't recall having a specific conversation about whether to adopt or not adopt those theories of action. Having said that, I do think that a refresher, like a quick, just a, hey, here's some examples of theories of action for you to consider adopting. I think we could do that pretty easily and quickly, either at a board meeting or some virtual meeting, or if some resources were shared with us, and then we could come and say, because you're right, it doesn't require for us to adopt.
Right.
All we're required to do is, hey, there's these 3 theories of actions that were proposed and considered. We're deciding not to do that.
Yeah.
And we haven't done that. It says one or more theories of action.
Right.
We haven't considered
Right.
any ones in particular.
Right. As I remember.
Could.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have to agree. As much as I want to check this box and say that we've done that, because technically we did do that, but from the point of view of substantial work that this board has done, we could actually do more as far as theories of action are concerned, and it's So I'm not going to make that determination by myself, but I want to gather that from the group. So what are we thinking on that?
I was in the same opinion as Juan, where I think that if we wanted to firmly count that as a check mark per se, I think there needs to be a firm conversation with considering multiple theories of action.
Okay.
I agree.
Mr. Otto? I agree. Okay.
And to include the superintendent, because the second part of that says person was included in the theory of consideration process.
I'm making a note of that. Thank you. Okay, then the next one, all board guardrails last from 3 to 5 years, and we've done that. The guardrails, interim guardrails and theories of action will challenge the organization and require change in adult behaviors. And if we say that we haven't actually considered adoption of theories of action, then that one can't be checked off either. But in the last column, let's look ahead to see what else we have. The board used a process that included students, parents, staff, and community members in a way that leads them to express ownership of the adopted guardrails and, if applicable, theories of action. So at least looking ahead, we see that theories of action are not necessary, but they're optional. But also the importance of including our stakeholders. The next one is all of the interim guardrails are predictive of their respective guardrails and are influenceable by the superintendent and the superintendent's team. Predictive suggests that there is some evidence of a correlation between the interim guardrail and the guardrail. Influenceable suggests that the superintendent, and through them, the staff, has authority over roughly 80% of whatever the interim guardrail is measuring. I feel like we've accomplished that, so I'm going to check that off. And then the last one, in addition to the guardrails on the superintendent's authority, the board has adopted 1 to 5 guardrails on its own behavior and evaluates itself against them at least quarterly. And that has not taken place yet. We have not adopted board guardrails yet. So for values and guardrails, I believe we've earned 5 points on that one. So, okay, good for us. So moving right along to the third domain, monitoring and accountability. On the far left in salmon, we need to determine if any of these are true. If any of these are true, we won't be earning points. As I go down this list, I think, you know, we've adopted a monitoring calendar. We've done that. The board tracks its time. Thank you, Dr. Benitez. But here's where I was stuck, and this is what I want to ask of my colleagues. Is the board has not consistently demonstrated the ability to distinguish between customer service issues and owner service issues. And I'm curious to know what we think about that. Do we think we have a handle on that? And this is not individual board members, but this would be us as a board. As a board, can we identify the difference between a customer issue and an owner issue? And so we're not answering as individuals, and we're not saying, you know, we're not calling people out, but we're saying as a board. So the 5 of us together speaking as one. So I need to know where everybody is on this. Mr. Miller.
So this one's a little tricky. Once again,
Yeah.
I think that it's important that we have tangible evidence of doing so, right? That's what I was speaking to the last metric per se on why I did or did not believe that we deserve that point. And so with this one in particular, though I think that philosophically we as a board have that understanding, have we shown tangible evidence in doing so? I don't think that has been done, but it will be when we execute the community outreach plan, right? Because as part of that, we will have a customer service component of it where there will be a representative of the district participating in these community outreach activities, helping address community concerns. And once again, it will be a tangible exercise that we can say is in response to this point here.
Well, okay. Since you brought up the community engagement part of it, it's going to take us the next school year to complete those community engagement meetings. So in your estimation, will we not get there until all of those meetings are complete?
Now, once again, I'm going to speak from an ERIC perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, fellow board members. I'm saying that this will be tangibly exercised through one of those. Now, if there's another exercise that I may be missing that does help us distinguish between the owner and customer service issues, then so be it. But one that I can think of for sure from a board perspective will be done at those community outreach events.
Okay, Dr. Benitez.
So thinking through Mr. Miller's comments, I think we will get to practice and hold that we're able to distinguish between customer service and owner issues at these town halls. But I do recall at one of our meetings, I couldn't remember if it was with AJ and or Greg or one of them, but it was at one of those meetings that they walked us through the differences between customer service and owner issues and asked us if we had questions and shared some examples and asked us for examples and even had an activity where we made a decision on which was customer service and owner. So to me, that is evidence that we have an understanding as a board. And they, from what I recall, affirmed, well, yep, it seems like you all have an understanding of this. How effective we are at that and whether we get to uphold and practice that, I think those meetings can provide that. But for me, if we're meeting with coaches on these things and we're able as a board to collectively differentiate and distinguish, it affirms that, because this is as not consistently demonstrated. I haven't seen evidence that we have not consistently demonstrated that we don't know what those are.
Okay, Mr. Otto, Ms. Lopez, do you have any thoughts on this one?
The community that that we will have met this one.
I will add, just from thinking about the board meeting agendas, that there is an aspect of your board meeting agendas representing this as well. When I think about policy and the way that you manage your board agenda, it does align with the training that was actually Greg that provided the training most recently. It does align with consistent, as a board, consistent demonstration of distinguishing between customer service and owner issues.
Okay, so before we can move on, we have to have a consensus on this one. So, Mr. Miller, are you, where do you stand as far as have we met this one or not?
I don't know. I'm still thinking that through. But I will say, now hearing, because I agree with you, there are components of our board agenda, along with hearing and being reminded of that workshop hosted by AJ. So we've received the training and we're exercising that in our board agendas. I don't know. I'm curious to hear other folks' opinions.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is we really haven't sufficiently met that requirement. But I'm going to go ahead and go through the rest of this domain to see where we are. The next one is the school system has not achieved any of its interim goals during the previous 12-month period. And actually on this one, our coach is suggesting that because we just adopted interim goals recently and we haven't had an adequate amount of time, to accomplish any of those, because we've had district goals in the past, I'm going to open this up to staff to provide us with an answer. Have we accomplished any district goals in the last, school year?
We have several data points that we can share to affirm that the school, so this is incorrect, that the school system has met interim goals in the way that the coaching supports. For example, we had a goal around kindergarten proficiency, and the board may remember that we actually increased the target because we met that goal significantly. There's also, we had a district goal around 9th through 12th grade students receiving a C or better in English, history, social science, math, and we met that goal as well. So there are several examples.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And that sounds good. We will look ahead to the next column. The board invests no less than 10% of its total board authorized public meeting minutes, monitoring its goals.
So on that one, I can actually give an update, Madam Chair, if you think this is an appropriate time to do that.
I think it is. And I'll just start by saying thank you for doing the tracking, because I know you did our time tracking for April, May, and June.
Yeah, so I met with, in April with Greg, and we practiced with that April 9th meeting. And then I tracked May 7th, May 19th, June 4th, and June 18th, which brings us to today's meeting. Full transparency, I haven't run my final number by with Greg for confirmation under approval, but I had us at 17% total time from April, not counting today's meeting.
Well, that's better than the 10%, so I'm going to say yes, we have met that requirement. Okay, thank you very much.
Pending, maybe we should say pending Greg's confirmation that according to their rubric, we've met the time.
Well, I have had conversations with him, and he said we're at least at 15%. So that that is in alignment with his calculations. Thank you very much. So the next item is the superintendent led the interim goals, guardrails, and monitoring calendar development processes while working collaboratively with the board. I'm seeing yes on that one, so yeah. The board has a board adopted monitoring calendar, yes, and thank you staff for that one. The board's monitoring calendar spans the length of the board's goals, yes. The board has received monitoring reports in accordance with its monitoring calendar.
Now we can say yes.
And the superintendent is evaluated only on performance regarding the board's goals, guardrails, interim goals, guardrails, and I don't think we're there yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay. So
I think our expectation is with this coming academic year, we should be able to get there on that one.
right. So we have a couple of areas to work in. So we'll move to the third column in green, meeting student outcomes. Meeting student outcomes focus, I should say. The board invests no less than 25% of its total board authorized public meeting minutes monitoring its goals. And we're not quite there yet, but we're on our way. No more than 2 goals are monitored per month. Gonna say yes on that. Everybody, yeah? Every goal is monitored at least 4 times per year. Yes, we're on track to do that. Every guardrail is monitored at least once per year. Heads are shaking like that. The board has been provided copies of, but unless required by law, did not vote to approve or disapprove the superintendent's plan or plans for implementing the board's goals and work to ensure that the plan included both an implementation timeline and implementation instruments. Okay, not yet. And then the last one in this column, the most recent annual superintendent evaluation took place no more than 12 months ago. Yes, we evaluate our superintendent on a regular basis every twice a year. So moving to the right-hand column in blue, mastering student outcomes focus. The board invests no less than 50% of its total board authorized public meeting minutes. No. Only board work was discussed and or acted on during board authorized public meetings. I don't know if we're there yet. What are we thinking? No, that's not yet. The board modifies its goals, guardrails, and monitoring calendar no more than once during the span of the board's adopted goals, unless they are met sooner. A longer period allows for more focus. Shorter allows for less. So far we haven't, no. Okay. The school system has achieved at least half of its interim goals during the previous 12-month period, and we've only just adopted those, so we haven't had time to do that yet. If the board approves an annual budget, it does so only after determining the board's goals are the first priority for resource allocation. I don't think we've done that one. The majority of the board's monitoring sessions during the period were rated effective or highly effective. And that's something we will work on with our coach. So in monitoring and accountability, we have not earned points yet, but hopefully by the time of our next quarterly evaluation, we'll put some points on the board for that one. So moving along to the next domain of communication and collaboration, on the far left column for not student outcome focused, do we think any of these are true? Because it's this column where we need everything to be false.
I think everything's false, Madam Chair.
Everything's false. Then I'm going to move on to the second column over, approaching student outcomes focus. The first one, all consent eligible items were placed on the consent agenda, and all but a few were voted on using a consent agenda. And we have done that, yes.
I used the rubric that AJ and Greg provided for us, so if that rubric monitors these things, that's a yes.
Okay, so that's a.
It's a yes.
I'm not going to read that.
It's a long yes.
That's a long yes. And you know what? That earned us a point. So, yes, that is a point. So in the green column, meeting student outcomes focused, there are no more than 4 board authorized public meetings per month, and none last more than 3 hours. While I know I'm getting some, yeah. No more than 4, yeah. The latter part of that,
One of our meetings was 5 hours, colleagues.
Yeah.
I had to track each of those minutes of those over 5 hours, yeah.
I do believe, and Dr. Brown, you can back me up on this one, I do believe one of our meetings was a record-breaking new record. Yet we digress. Let us get back on track. Okay. The board schedules no more than 5 topics for discussion during any one board authorized public meeting. We can strive for that one. The board limits its adoption of board policies regarding school system operations to matters that are required by law, an appropriate exercise of the board's oversight authority as defined by the board's adopted goals and/or guardrails. Existing policies that do not meet one of these criteria have been removed from the board's policy manual, though the superintendent may retain them. Oh, you said yes to this one? Board, where are we at on this one? Are we feeling like we've done that? I know we've been engaged in a policy review. I don't know if we've gone to that extent.
I think because we still haven't finalized the policies that are in the deck, we're not able to tell whether we're doing that or not.
Okay, so we're, I'd say we're on track to doing that, but we haven't finished that. Okay. The board made no edits to the board's regularly scheduled meeting agenda during the meeting and during the 3 business days before the meeting unless a state of emergency was declared. I think we've done that. Yeah. And then in the blue column, mastering student outcomes focus, there are no more than 2 board authorized public meetings per month and none last more than 2 hours. That is something to strive for.
So I do have a question about that, and maybe our team that meets with Greg can ask him. I'm not counting. So for today's board workshop and board meeting, I'm counting those as 2 separate meetings. Mm-hmm. And so we've been ongoing having more than 2 meetings a month. So unless we restructure or redefine how we're doing special meetings, board workshops, and regular meetings, it might be harder to achieve the no more than 2 meetings a month criteria that this column has for.
I believe that in his coaching that workshop is included in counting minutes, analysis for monitoring reports and things, but we'll clarify it next week's for the following week.
And just to clarify, Dr. Baker, I am counting all the meetings. I'm just not counting them as one meeting.
Okay, that's a good clarification to make on that one. The board schedules no more than 3 topics for discussion during any board authorized public meeting. Probably not yet, no. The board has adopted few enough policies that the full board as a whole is able to review every policy at least once during every length of time equal to a board member's term of office. And not yet. The board received the final version of materials to be voted on at least 7 calendar days before the board authorized public meeting during which the materials would be considered. Yes, we consistently get that 7 days in advance. The board uses a process that included students, parents, staff, and community members in a way that led them to express ownership of the adopted goals and guardrails. I would say that we haven't done that yet, but that once we conduct our community engagement meetings, we'd be on our way to that. So in this domain for communication and collaboration, I believe we earned a point. 1. Okay, so next we go to unity and trust. The far left in the salmon column, not student outcomes focused yet. Do we believe that all of these are false? Or another way of saying that is there anything in this column that's true? And I'm going to ask my colleagues on this one. Board members serve on the committees formed by the superintendent or staff without approval of the superintendent and a majority of the board. But I think we voted on our last committee or superintendent advisory groups. I believe we voted on that, but I wanted to ask, and am I remembering that correctly?
So the one that we actually upheld and then put into policy was yours and Eric's membership on our governance team. So we are not in violation of not doing that.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I thought this is a self-evaluation for the entire board, so I needed to check. Okay, for approaching student outcomes focused in the next column, attendance at all regularly scheduled board meetings was over 80% during the previous 3-month period. I believe we've done that. The board has adopted a policy or procedure requiring that information provided by the superintendent to one board member is provided to all board members.
That's true.
True. The board reviews all policies governing board operating procedures at least once during every length of time equal to a board member's term of office. I don't know if we've done that yet. What do you think?
When I read this, the way that I read it was especially about bylaws, and so thinking about the bylaw review and development, I gave it a yes because of that, thinking about a term going through all of the board bylaws, either introducing new and voting upon new bylaws or revisiting, I think it was 6 existing bylaws. So I gave it a yes for that reason. Not that that's your answer, but that's how I rated it.
Okay, colleagues, what do we think?
So if we're counting our current terms, we are in the process of doing that. So by default, yes, we are doing that. If we're counting for those of us that served a previous term here, that term as a part of this, we did not do that. Jeff began a process. I don't know if you began or built on the process that Wayne had outlined, where all policies now come through the board in that way, first from a superintendent advisory group perspective, and then through the board. So I think by that measure, we're also fulfilling that. And that's a process that we agreed on as a board, and that's the process that we've been using for all policies, including the current policies that we're reviewing.
Okay, so does everybody consider that we've taken care of this bullet point?
And just for confirmation, we have a system in place to track all policies.
Yeah, we're certainly building it as we're going, but absolutely we're going to be reviewing all those policies over the course. I'm reading a term as 4 years, so over the course of an extended period of time, we should be able to touch all of those and update.
Thank you. Then I would say yes.
Okay. Is there any disagreement on this one? I'm not hearing any disagreement, so I'm going to check that off as well. The next one is the board has adopted an ethics and conflicts of interest statement, and we did that
Last board meeting,
and we all signed it, so we're good on that one. The last one here is all board members agree that if the board has committees, their role is only to advise the board, not to advise staff. It looks like we've earned another point.
Yep.
That was a lot of work to earn another point, but that's
I do
good.
have a question on going back to this outcome focused, the first section, whereas reads, board members serve on committees formed by the superintendent or staff without approval of the superintendent and a majority of the board. Did we approve all the other committees that we're in as a board? Is that what it's asking us to do? Because based on the new bylaws, the answer to that is yes. But I do know that we have not voted on the committees for all of the board members the committees that we're in.
The superintendent advisory groups?
Yes.
I think we voted on that.
So the way that I'm
go
reading
ahead.
this,
Mhm.
So we are not student outcomes focused if these are true. So the way that I'm reading this is board members serve on committees formed by the superintendent or staff without approval of the superintendent. The superintendent actually is the creator of the student superintendent advisory groups. So by conclusion, then you've approved of the superintendent advisory groups, and a majority of the board. The example that I gave is when we were considering the passage of that policy, and we had a lively and long discussion. The first attempt of us upholding that was that we required a vote per policy and procedure for Mr. Miller's membership on our, I keep forgetting the name, Joe, Student Outcomes Focused Government Implementation Committee. So I think that was where then we upheld that process and procedure in the policy that we passed that required for committees to be approved by a majority of the board. We have a policy that we passed.
Yeah, once there was a policy in place that you all approved, that was the first action with the policy in place. And actually, President Craighead and I just talked about as the fiscal year turns and we're in a new fiscal year, the advisory group membership will come back to the board for a vote.
Yeah, the way I'm reading this is just about any of the committees that any of us sit in would require your approval and a majority of the board approval.
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of both of what you're saying. Once there was a policy, the first action was you all approved Eric's membership, and you will be, next month, you will see the advisory groups, you'll have input, and then it will come to the board based on my recommendation to you all after talking to you, and you'll vote on this year's advisory groups.
Because now we have that.
Because now you have a
policy to be able to do
policy,
that.
yes, right. It is guided by the policy.
Okay, then we will move to the next column over, meeting student outcomes focus. The board has included language in its ethics and conflicts of interest statement. Well, let's see, the next three bullet points have to do with the ethics and conflicts of interest statement. And in the interest of time, I'm going to lump that all together and glance over at our legal counsel, because all of these things were included in there and we've all signed them. So, so we can check those things off because that's been taken care of. And then the last bullet point in this column, the board unanimously agreed during the most recent self-evaluation that all board members have honored the 3 aforementioned ethical boundaries during the previous evaluation period.
So we haven't done that. If we do that today, the next time we review this, we'd be able to check that one off. What we're doing today would be the first time, because we have those policies in place, that we'd be able to fulfill that. But we haven't unanimously agreed, because this would be the most recent self-evaluation, Madam Chair.
Right, right. And that ethics and conflict of interest statement was just signed
Correct.
last month.
Correct.
Okay.
So we haven't,
So,
in my opinion, fulfilled that.
okay. In which case, we need to unanimously agree today that we have done this, or that we can hold ourselves to this.
Well, that we completed this evaluation that we're doing right now. When we, upon completion of
Okay.
this self-evaluation,
I see what
that
you're
would be
saying.
checked off.
Okay. That will
makes
be
sense?
checked off by the next one. Yes. Okay, then moving to the far right column, mastering student outcomes focus. The board unanimously agreed during the most recent self-evaluation that all board members adhered to all policies governing board operating procedures during the previous evaluation period. And we haven't finished with our bylaws, so I don't think we can consider that one accomplished yet, but we're on our way. The next one, all board members and the superintendent agreed during the most recent self-evaluation that none of the board members have given operational advice or instructions to staff members. No.
I would use the same rationale that you just used for the previous one.
Okay,
That we don't have all of our policies in place yet to be able to
great.
surmise that.
And then the next one, all board members have memorized all the board's goals and the current status of each. Let me phrase it like this. Does anybody think we've done that? I'm going to move to the next bullet point. The board conducted a quarterly self-evaluation during the previous 3-month period, or annually if the most recent score was 80 or higher. But we did do a quarterly evaluation 3 months ago, so good for us. All right, so we earned a point 1. Let me just, okay. So, we're at 32, okay. So our last domain to cover is continuous improvement for not student outcomes focused. Do we think any of these are true? So I believe all those are false. We can move on to the next column. Approaching student outcomes focus, the board tracks its use of time and reports monthly the percentage of board authorized public meeting time invested in monitoring the board's goals and interim goals. Okay. And then the board tracks the estimated annual cost of staff time invested in governance during its annual self-evaluation.
Yeah.
This includes the time of any staff members invested in preparing for, attending, and debriefing after meetings. This includes all board authorized public meetings as well as all closed sessions and all hearings. I don't believe we've done that
Jill,
yet.
have you received guidance as to how we would even begin begin to
Yeah.
track that?
Not at this time, I have
Yeah,
not.
that was going to be my next question in regards to,
Right.
and I've said this 3 or 4 times, but I'll say it again. Having tangible evidence. I don't know. Yeah, that's going to be a tricky one.
Okay, then I believe this one will require a training, and lucky for us, we have coaches. So that might be a next step. Moving forward, the board has provided time during regularly scheduled board-authorized public meetings to recognize the accomplishments of its students and staff regarding progress towards goals and interim goals. And okay. Are we good with a yes on that? Okay. The most recent board self-evaluation took place no more than 12 months ago. Yes.
Yes.
So moving on to the third column, meeting student outcomes focused. The most recent board annual self-evaluation took place no more than 45 days before the most recent superintendent evaluation. I'm not sure about that one. That would be, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, the 45-day thing might be a little tricky. The board has hosted and the board members have led or co-led at least one training session. We haven't done that yet, but we're on track to do that.
That's coming.
And that's coming. The board has continuously updated the status and targets of all goals, guardrails, and interim goals and guardrails, and publicly displays them in the room in which the board most frequently holds its regularly scheduled board meetings. That would be this room. I don't believe we've done that yet. So that could be a next step. And lastly, in this column, the board conducted the most recent self-evaluation and voted to adopt the results. Yes, we did that. So moving to the last column, mastering student outcomes focus. The board included students as presenters in at least one of the student outcomes focus governance training sessions during the previous 12 months. We haven't done that yet. Prior to being selected, all newly selected board members received training on student outcomes. No, not yet. The board conducted the most recent quarterly self-evaluation. No. Okay, so we haven't yet earned points on that one, but we will celebrate 32 points. We did from 0 to 32. That's progress. The only thing left is to take a vote to accept our quarterly evaluation and the score of 32 points.
Move to approve.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 5-0. Thank you very much. We still have more for the agenda.
So you have an option, respecting staff who is here and ready to present, if you'd like to take a short break and then proceed, or to ask the team to come back on August 6th and provide their presentation on August 6th. Dependent on questions. You could listen to the presentation, break for lunch. For those of you who want to ask questions, that's an option, and not stop the presentation for questions. You could do that.
I know that this isn't fair, but I'm going to pose it back to them. Dave, what's your thoughts? I'd hate to put you under the gun here, you know, because I know it's been a tight day, and it's your team.
I think we should go ahead. Is everybody okay with that?
I'm okay so long as the staff gets an hour lunch, because they are going to be here all day and they're entitled to their hour lunch.
We don't ever get an hour lunch. So wow, that's really nice of you, Ms. Lopez, because that would be like a gift. That would be a gift.
And on that note, nope. Yeah. So I think we should go ahead we'll dedicate a half an hour. We will try to limit our questions. So, Mr. Miranda, the floor is yours.
And thank you for waiting so patiently for your opportunity.
All good. It's good for us to be a part of these sessions as well and just see what else is happening within the district, of course. So I'm going to dive right in and just focus in on the presentation content in here. And of course, first and foremost, I have to jump in and present and officially congratulate Tracy here and kind of put her on the spot. So Tracy is actually on the board agenda tonight, this evening, in terms of the personnel calendar for official appointment on the personnel calendar as the new Executive Director of Facilities Development and Planning. We thought, you know, what better place to introduce her than to have her co-present with me? Just kind of put her on the spot right then and there. But she's been a part of our team for some time. She's done consulting work for our district. Tracy has a background in architecture, leads with humility. As I thought, how am I going to describe Tracy? I was kind of glancing at the adult portrait qualities back there. And that's basically Tracy, by the way. So keeps students at the center, leads with humility, just does a great job in everything she does. And Tracy's going to do the heavy lifting on this presentation. I'm really just kind of teeing things up for her. This particular slide we have is a customary slide we have just to give you a snapshot in quick fingertip facts with respect to where we are with the priority work, right? So the priority work for some time, we know it's warming up. It's midsummer here. So of course, we always want to talk about HVAC and just where we are with respect to those priority projects. And you can see every single project is nearing completion, in construction, or in design, right? So there's no project that's just kind of left out there outside of those areas. We are moving as fast as we can with respect to HVAC installs, clear focus on heat mitigation strategies that we always focus on this time of year as well. So we feel very comfortable in that regard. Kind of by coincidence, this particular presentation and the way it took shape for us, as we took stock on projects that are kind of finishing up and just nearing completion this summer, we thought, gee, there's actually quite a few athletic-based projects that are nearing completion at this point in time. So we've had a clear focus. We continue the focus on HVAC work, but we didn't want to forget to note some of the other projects that are happening out there as well. So you see the major highlight there, 500,000 square feet in building improvements in terms of athletic spaces. These help our student athletes. They help our community at large. They're just incredible assets for us as a school system all the way through. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy and let her kind of speak to some of the specifics on a handful of these projects, and we'll go to town.
Yeah, thank you, David. I appreciate the info. I've worked with many of you already, so I'm excited in this new role to work with you all more in depth. But as David talked about, you know, I'm going to focus a lot on some of those athletic improvements, many of which are going to be completed and ready for student use come first day of school. So the first one I'll start with is our Jordan High School Stadium. This is our first phase for the stadium of the project, and you can see in this photograph here, on one of our most recent progress photos, is the new all-weather field that Principal Irving was really instrumental in bringing that nice blue Jordan color to our all-weather field. And just another screenshot that gives you a little bit more close-up as we have the Panther logo there in the center of the football field. And included with this stadium, with the all-weather field, you know, we'll have our 400-meter track. We have home side bleachers that'll accommodate 3,500 spectators here. Along with that, we've got our new video scoreboard, which is really amazing. We can share some video of that with you all. And some other amenities like the ticketing, concessions, and restrooms and the sort. And then, of course, we have ongoing construction with our new gymnasium and aquatic center that will be slated for opening in 2027. And then we also have, once that is complete, we'll end with our new softball field, soccer field, where our interim housing is currently placed at that site. So this is the culmination of years-long major renovation at this campus, so we're really excited to see this all finally be completed very soon. And then our next project is our Wilson High School Aquatic Center. Seems like we were just talking about the planning of this project more recently, and here we are getting ready, the finishing touches on the ticketing concessions, locker building, restrooms and whatnot, and of course the aquatic center itself with the new Mirtha pool. And this is another shot of one of our recent progress photos for this campus. For this center, which is anticipated to be ready to start filling with water at the end of this month. And of course, being a Mirtha pool, that filling and getting that acclimation of the chemicals and whatnot in there runs pretty quick for this type of pool. So again, it will be ready for opening first day of school when the kids come back. So we're really excited about this one as well. In addition to obviously the pool, the locker rooms and whatnot, we also have shaded spectator seating that will accommodate 500 visitors. And then similarly, Lakewood High School's Aquatic Center will also be ready for the first day of school. Similar to Wilson, our 50-meter pool, our spectator seating with a shaded canopy for 500 seats. And as you can see here, we've actually gotten to the filling point. So it's very excited. It looks really great. The interiors are near completion as well. And as you all recall, we have the privacy changing stalls that serve as combo with showers, so students are able to go in and out with that privacy to be able to change for their PE activities or their athletic competitions. So really excited about this one. Mirtha pool as well, yes. Every aquatic center that we're doing at our high schools will feature the 50-meter Mirtha pool. And then other projects that we're completing is the Hamilton Middle School Gym. It's a brand new gymnasium building that has been in the planning stages for several years now. Believe it or not, one of the first projects that I was assigned when I came in for program support was the Hamilton Middle School Gym. And so it's very exciting to see it come to fruition. It's pretty much near done right now. As you can see in some of these images, we're doing the finishing touches in the locker room right now, which, much like the high schools, will also have the privacy changing stalls. And currently also going to be taking down the existing gymnasium that we left available to the site as we completed construction. And that area will be paved over with new sports courts. And this one I'm excited about. So this picture is a rendering of our Avalon all-weather field that will be accommodating baseball and football. And this one, as you can imagine, has been a little bit more challenging because getting materials out to the island takes a lot more effort than other sites. And that to the right side of the picture, you can see on the north side of the campus, we had to push back some of that hill and build this amazing retaining wall to be able to ensure we have a competitive baseball field. And this is pretty much what it's going to look like when it's complete. And I wanted to give you all that visual because sometimes it's, can't quite see that with the dirt, right? So, but you see these progress photos on the left is that massive retaining wall that we worked diligently between our project team and the state architect's office that will ensure that we retain that hillside in that area. And then the extensiveness of, if you're familiar, all of you familiar with the Avalon campus, going from one end to the other, it has the different elevations. And of course, this is the highest, most elevation of that campus. So we had to do a lot of in-depth design for the accessibility of getting folks from one end to the other. And that's just a small screenshot that gives you an idea of the work that goes in to provide that access. And then just going through some other of our HVAC modernization projects. These are some good snapshots at Gant Elementary that shows you the extent of, what we have to do to put in our new HVAC systems, in addition to our new ceilings and our lighting and things of that nature that go into these types of projects that we've been completing. And then these next images, this is our first campus where we're putting in some outdoor classrooms. So you see here, we've already got the shade canopy up. We've put in some concrete seat walls for students to be able to sit in. There's going to be some drought-tolerant landscaping. And the pavement itself will actually have some colored, cool coatings that will help with, you know, the heat island effect that can happen in our summer months and whatnot. And also just to bring some whimsicalness to the space, right, and make it fun for the students to be outside. There'll also be power and data provided to this outdoor classroom so it can truly function as a teaching space for students. And then, as you all know, we're moving into the construction phase of Poly High School, their major transformation. So we've got our interim housing. All of our buildings are now in place, and we're kind of doing all of the interior cleanups to get those ready, and having our move team moving those classrooms over so that they'll be ready for the first day of school for our first occupants. As you all know, our career tech education classroom building is now under construction, and we're gearing up to start the modernization at some of our existing buildings this fall as well. So this was a very important and massive effort for us to make sure we get our interim housing completed in time for kids on the first day of school. And then this is just a list of other projects that we have in construction. Some of them will be finishing up and opening this fall, such as Gompers Elementary, Stanford Middle School, Tincher K-8. So those are a few of our mod projects that'll be completing. Others that have been in construction, like our Butler improvements, our Washington transformation, and then several others that are actually had just kicked off this summer include Carver, Marshall, Hoover. So we've got a lot under construction going on right now. And as if that wasn't enough, we'll get to share with you our list of projects that we have in planning. So you can see here, these are the 26-27 when their construction starts are anticipated. So we have to be definitely in the midst of planning on all of these projects. So our teams are very busy working with their design teams, getting through our various agency approvals, SCE, DSA, in some cases working with the city. Where we have some off-site improvements, like we do at Gant, for instance, where we're putting in a new pickup drop-off for that campus. So we're busy, we're excited, and that's about it.
Well, thank you so much. It is very exciting. And I know that we've really gone over as far as our schedule this morning, but thank you for being flexible and going with the flow as we give you very little time for your presentation. But just know that we appreciate all the work that goes on behind the scenes. I know that there are challenges, especially these days with supply chain issues caused by uncertain tariffs and things, and construction is being impacted by that. I see more than one of my schools listed, and I know how they're affected. And so we will all work on our patience and keep our excitement in check.
Yeah, and we really appreciate this. The school sites are amazing. From the principals to the site staff, they really are collaborative with us. And then, working with our facilities liaison really bridges that gap. And so it's been good.
Yeah. I just wanted to give a special shout out to David and the rest of the facilities team. I may have shared that back in April, I took a cohort of a little bit shorter than 75 Long Beach Unified School District students in collaboration with two nonprofits, Demo Chicks and Operation Jumpstart, to visit multiple of our projects that were under construction. I mean, this was just a few months ago, and I'm looking at where we are now. It's like, oh man, you all are flying. But I think the part that I was most appreciative of is not just the team's willingness to open up their doors to teach these young people, but the level of detail and consideration that goes into not only each classroom or each facility, but also understanding the impact it's going to have on the users. And so I just thought that that was really very insightful. I know the kids really, really appreciated it. I mean, obviously, you guys are in the nuances of construction and the science and technology and everything that goes into it, but having the true empathy for the users and being able to translate that to the young people. I know that they were very much appreciative of that, and so I just wanted to thank you for that opportunity a couple months ago, and congratulations on where you guys are thus far.
Thank you so much. And really, to your point, we saw several photos that Tracy just kind of spoke to, and some you may be wondering, like, are they going to hit the finish mark based on where they are in construction at this point in time? But as you said, things go fast, right? So when we put our construction and planning hats on and we go out and visit every one of these school sites, we feel good with respect to progress at this point in time and kind of the timeline we have remaining before school starts.
Thank you. And also, congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, well, this concludes our morning workshop. We will adjourn this meeting, and our next regularly scheduled board meeting is 5 o'clock tonight. Thank you, everyone.